Right. Hello. My name is Ben Walker of Britain Elects. Welcome to election night for the Wellingborough and Kingswood by-elections. The coverage, the stream, the fun, the action will start after all enough of that. Right, let's turn this down and let's get to it. Right, hello, thank you for joining us. Welcome to the many hundreds of you that are currently watching right now. Well, two parliamentary by-elections, two key, apparently key, indicative. Well, I don't know, we're apparently in election year, so what can we work from these? Let me just turn that music down. Welcome to the Britain Elect stream. We tend to do a lot of these every time there's a parliamentary by-election, if I have the energy. I've had quite a busy day. I've just come from my full council meeting where, as Cheshire West, we've agreed the results and agreed the budget, sorry, and I've just got home, so there we are. Anyway, thank you very much for joining us. If you want to join the conversation, if you want to have the conversation with this stream, you can find us on YouTube as well. I'm not doing Twitch, unfortunately, because the system I'm using, Restream, only limits the channels I can stream to just two outlets, and I chose X, Twitter, and YouTube. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us. If you want to join the conversation, give us some stuff, go onto YouTube. But it looks like as well you can talk to me via Twitter as well, which absolutely delighted. Thank you for joining us. Daniel asks, when can we accept, when are the results due? Well, time now is 1:30. Good time to start, I suppose. Although if I started at 10 p.m, I think I would have killed myself by now. We are probably due Kingswood. Kingswood's gone pretty quiet, I think, if I'm right in saying. Wellingborough, we're talking, in both cases, we're talking the results within the next few hours. So it's 1:30 now. We could have Wellingborough by 3 a.m, 4 a.m, and I suppose we could have Kingswood, I would say probably similar times. Although I would have thought Kingswood, what with being a slightly more urban seat, would come sooner, but doesn't seem to be the case. Anyway, if you want to join the conversation, you can do on YouTube. Go onto YouTube, Google search Britain Elects. You'll probably find the channel and the stream. Join there. You've probably, by and large, got a Google account, so you can do that. And that should be it. It seems as though you can also talk on Twitter as well. I didn't know that function existed. I should actually have a look at that later. But anyway, welcome to the stream. It's been a pretty exhausting day for me, so if I'm a bit too tired or if I show slight exhaustion, please don't worry for me. I've just been a long day. So, yeah, I've got coffee. I was hoping that I would come to streams like these with a wee bev or something, and instead I'm doing coffee. and I think it's a sign of my age. I've been doing. I don't think there's a parliamentary by-election I've ever missed over the last 10. Well, we're looking at 11 years now, and yeah. I with age, I'm 28 now, but it's catching up. I can't wait for the 30s. But anyway, so by-election season. This is two key, or rather, pretty important or indicative, or whatever you want to call them. Two pretty significant. That's a better word. Two significant parliamentary by-elections. One in Northamptonshire, Wellingborough, vacated by Peter Bone, a member of Parliament for many decades, who was quite a maverick in the House of Commons. He was a fella who was known to be incredibly Eurosceptic, very Eurosceptic. There was a talk at one point in 2014 that he might jump ship to UKIP, but he was one of those Conservatives who placed a lot of truck with the Conservative identity and brand, and he didn't, obviously wouldn't do that. Seats been vacated by him as a consequence of a recall petition signed by was it 17%? 13% of the electorate to get rid of him, such is the way democracy can work sometimes, and there's a by-election to be held over stuff he did in the House of Commons. We then also have a different kind of by-election in Kingswood. Yeah, questionable character, as Lion and Fox 81 says about Mr. Peter Bone, who what I always found funny was every time he stood up in the House of Commons in the early years of the coalition years, he always talked about, what the coalition's policies will mean for his wife, Mrs. Bone, and whether David Cameron can necessarily give Mrs. Bone any pleasure with a budget. Doesn't seem like it went that way. Anyway, Kingswood, for all intents and purposes, is a suburb of Bristol. I don't think the residents of Kingswood would like that, but given I'm sitting quite comfortably far away in Chester, I think I can say that. Kingswood town, pretty sizable, grown, relatively affluent. In local elections, it tends to, whilst of course it's Lab v Khan, there's a sizable quarter of voters who do go for the Lib Dems or Greens. This is suburbia, and in a general election, if Labour ever fancied its chances of governing this country again, which I think they are more likely than not on course to do, Kingswood is one of those seats Labour absolutely needs to win. And if you look at the national polling, Labour's ahead. Labour's ahead of the Conservatives by about 18, 19, 20 points, depending on what you look at. But if you look at Britain Elects, it's, I think, a lead of 18 or 19 points now. And in Kingswood, you're looking at a Labour lead, polling implied, of around about 12 points. So pretty comfortable, pretty safe, guaranteed Labour gain. In Wellingborough, meanwhile, given the scale of Labour's lead over the Conservatives nationally, it's looking like... the polling would imply it's nip and tuck. The polling would imply that Labour might only have a 1, 2, 3 point lead over the Conservatives. But based on what we know on the ground, and given I'm broadcasting right now at 1:30, a few hours after polling closed, the general indication is that the Labour Party have won by quite a significant margin, and that the Conservatives, whilst they might not be saying it to all broadcasters, are looking like they will concede. There's a lot to get through here, because one, what does this mean? What does this say about the country at large? What can we read into this, if anything? Actually, here's something to consider. Can you read into parliamentary by-elections even this close to a general election? You would think maybe minds are sharpening now. People are moving into the columns they want to stick with now. Maybe the arguments that in parliamentary by-elections low turnout means a disproportionate, unrepresentative type of voter is coming out to the polling station. Do those arguments have any sway? Absolutely not, actually. No, they don't. Here's something for you. There's a wonderful analysis done in the book Sex, Lies and the Ballot Box, I think the first edition, which did find, whatever the scale of turnout, you're getting a pretty representative sample of what public opinion would be in a high turnout election and a low turnout election. Smaller parties do get more overrepresented, but we're talking not by significant margins, by about 5 to 10 points or so, which can be the difference between winning and losing. But if you want to say, this election means nothing. Well, it means something within this margin. Anyway, look, is the music all right? How are we doing here? I thought I'd choose some stream background, and what did I go for? I went for Sims and the Sim City, and I thought, that might work. Will it work? I don't know. Because I don't want to get copyright, whatever. But anyway, Daniel also asks, Daniel asked when we're expecting declarations, probably between 3 a.m. and maybe 5 a.m. I don't know. Could be around then. And we also get, Daniel also asks, Reform UK's chances in Wellingborough. Well, you can see my mug right now, but we also have some wonderful charts to do, because every time I do a by-election stream, I love to pull out some charts and show you how things are. Anyway, so let's see what we can show you today. First of all, we'll start with what is probably the by-election that's easier to forecast, which is Wellingborough. So this is what Britain Predicts is saying in Kingswood. The 2019 election, remind yourself how it was. It was 56% Conservative, Labour 33%, and 9% for the smaller parties. Then you see what the forecast is now. I think these figures are just a few points out of date, but the general vibe is clear. You see the Tories fall from 56% to 32%. Which, what's that? 56, 46, 36, 24.4. That's pretty sizable, isn't it? And then you see the Labour Party rising by 11 points there. You should always know, and I hope this is being noticed at least, is that the Tory fall is not necessarily being replicated, being mirrored by a Labour rise. The Tories are losing, let's say hypothetically they lose 20 points, and Labour probably only gains about 10 points of that. The rest go to a smattering of smaller parties, the Lib Dems, and there's a bit of churn, which means the Greens make some gains, and of course Reform does too. And in Kingswood, it looks as though Reform could pick up double figure percentage share, but I think, as I've said many times before, that's not common, that's not probable, that doesn't happen all the time, and I think we've seen that. I often like to point to forecasts, which here, just to return there, I like to use the Britain Predicts forecast as a sort of barometer of what the polls imply in these types of seats, and every time we've had a parliamentary by-election, the Reform vote share has always underperformed what the polls implied. Now, look, the data about the rise of UKIP wasn't great at the time. It was very good immediately after the rise of UKIP and its subsequent fall. But I do know this, is that every time there was a by-election during UKIP's years, they were doing really well in by-elections, overperforming the polls, in fact. I remember, for instance, the 2012 Rotherham by-election. Of course, there was the quite localised scandal of grooming gangs, and what was it, adoption parents, a couple wanted to adopt some kids, got refused it because they said they voted UKIP or something like that. I remember it because it was when I was really starting to pay attention to politics. And in the Rotherham by-election, UKIP nationally were polling 10% or so, but in Rotherham they came away with like 20-something%. Okay, right, Rotherham, fine, fair enough, that's the Yorkshire coalfields, but I think to, do 10 points better in a constituency in a certain part of the world than what the national polls imply does suggest, there is a feeling of support for you. For Reform so far, however, there's none of that. Absolutely nothing. Now, don't get me wrong, in the Tamworth by-election, which Labour won by 5 percentage points, Britain Predicts had them winning it by, I think, about 1 point to 2 points. You had Reform forecast to get 10%, and they got 5%. So almost, actually no, they saved their deposit. They just about saved their deposit, and they did rather well there. You could call that a relative success, but they nevertheless still underperformed the polls. So, just going back to Kingswood. Here we are, easy Labour gain. Do I have the numbers for... What do we got here? Disaster due. Here it is. Here's what we're expecting in Wellingborough and Kingswood. This is what I put out in the New Statesman's morning call newsletter earlier this morning. So these are the key figures you need to know. Wellingborough, Last election, Conservative 62%, Labour 27%. The forecast now, polls-based forecast, I need to imply, need to remind you, has Labour on 38% to the Conservatives 37%, and note that figure for Reform, 13%. Now look at Kingswood as well. The idea that Reform are only going to do well in Wellingborough but not Kingswood, based on the polls, is a bit of a hard ass. But look, Kingswood, Conservative 56 at the last election. Now they're expected to fall down to 32. Labour, meanwhile, are expected to go up from 33 to 45. 12-point increase there, and a 24-point fall for the Conservatives. So yeah, 2 Labour gains expected, due, and based on what we're hearing on the ground tonight, which is why I'm loading this stream up at this time, not earlier, is that it is looking likely that we are due 2 Labour gains indeed. So, what have we got here? Shall we keep an eye? Let me just go back to... Can I show this? Yes, right. So, you can now see that the chat is alive. So, what have we got here? Just scrolling up. Dan Mara asks, where's the cat? Oh, yeah, disappointing news. I don't have a cat anymore. I lost her in late October. 25th of October, 24th, 5th of October, in fact. She, my cat's been not housebound, but she barely lives by my side. I always like to have her out in the garden. She likes going out in the garden. And then one day just went up and left, and I couldn't find her. So, yeah, that's the sad story of my cat, and I don't know where she is, so which is quite a shame. What else we got? I think that's probably a Lib Dem account. Reform UK Limited Company must be so disappointed they were claiming they would win Delusion of Grandeur. The idea Reform could win Wellingborough is for the birds, and it was always for the birds. And I'll say this. If let's say this by-election happened in 2013 or 2014, in Wellingborough, the idea that UKIP could win that then was also for the birds too, because UKIP's strength was a lot more evenly spread between Labour and Tory, 2010 Labour and 2010 Tory voters than perhaps we often thought. It wasn't like 50-50. It was obviously quite 60-40 or 70-30 Tory Labour, but UKIP's strength often wasn't safe as houses Tory seats. It was a certain kind of Tory seat that I think often gets forgotten. So once more, you think, okay, Brexit-leaning borough, you think like, say, quite a radical conservative, a hard right conservative. You'd think they would entertain Reform as a consequence of that. No, you've got to appreciate that Reform's appeal isn't necessarily to the people who are easily bought in by hard right conservatism. It's a different kind of vote, and they are not necessarily concentrated in rural shire seats. They're elsewhere. They are, to be honest with you, Yorkshire coalfields. They are, bits of Sunderland. They are elsewhere. Actually, the Rhondda in Wales. It's different. It's different. Anyway, is the music all right? Yeah, I think we're doing all right. Anyway, Thomas Boyd, you only coverage in these 2 by-election. Yes, Labour Party win 2 by-election. Okay, thank you. That makes sense. Sophia, I met you at the Labour Party conference. How you doing? Even if Reform do well in Wellingborough today, they'd still only match UKIP's 2015 performance, and that's despite throwing resources at it, despite Reform's VI. Yeah. Again, Reform's centre of strength is not where perhaps we assume hard right parties would have appeal. It's not directly shire seats. It's a bit more urban based, and to be honest with you, even when they perform or put up candidates there, they do quite poorly too. There is very little sign they're doing well, particularly anywhere. We may find that changes tonight with Wellingborough. If, for instance, Reform do get 10% in Wellingborough, well, I'll take my hat off to them and say well done for once in your party's career, party's life, party's limited company adventure. You've actually matched the polls, but you haven't done it yet, and so as such I'm doubting the presence, I suppose, of Reform's support. Anyway, what we got here? Oh, I'm just looking at all. Corbs for life, hashtag stop Starmer with 5 flags there, including the Chinese flag for some reason. Says, can't wait for the Rochdale stream. Should I do a Rochdale stream? Should I do a Rochdale stream? That's going to be, actually, to be fair, the prospect of George Galloway winning or not, and Azar Ali either pulling through or not is actually really interesting. It won't have necessarily significant implications. It won't have, significant implications, I think, for politics in Westminster. But, well, Westminster will cover it till death do us part. But I don't think it will change the national conversation as much as some people think, or want it to think, or want it to. What have we got? Dan Morrow, sorry. Reform's lack of headline act counts against. Do you think Farage will lead it into election? I think Nigel Farage is the kind of fellow who, if he sees a win, he will run at it, which is why he rushed into the 2019 Euro elections, and only and since then really has done nothing, because he doesn't see a win. I don't think he's going to do it, because I don't think Reform's necessarily got the strength to propel him into Westminster or come even close. I think he chases victories when he smells opportunities for them. 2015 he could have done in South Thanet. UKIP almost got a second seat. They were 300 votes away from winning the Thurrock seat in 2015. They had potential. Reform doesn't have that now. Nor indeed did the Brexit Party in the 2019 election. Thomas Boyd, George Galloway win Rochdale by-election. Yes, it is Keith Wood. Thomas Boyd, I think your spelling isn't there. No, Thomas Boyd, I don't think you are. Can't understand a lot of that. I'm sorry. Sophia says Kingswood declaration rumoured soon. That was 6 minutes ago. Okay, keeping an eye on that. Thank you very much indeed. Always got to keep an eye on that. What we got? Watching from Australia. What are your stay awake tactics? This coffee. Get enthusiastic about something. One thing I always do. My best moments are. My best moments are when I. How about this? No, let me start again. I am at my most productive this time of the night, 2 a.m. in the morning, when I probably have a meeting at 9 a.m. straight away, a coffee morning with someone from, I don't know, the cathedral or whatever. I'm a councillor for Chester City Centre, and I kind of feel like, right, shit, I've got a great idea. Oh, Kingswood is apparently incoming. Is that the case? Let's pull up the BBC, shall we? But yeah, how do you stay awake? Try and find something to get enthused by. Pursue. I don't know. No, that's a stupid. How is that a helpful? How is that a helpful answer? So sorry. Yeah. If we're due a Kingswood by-election soon. Oh, they're all standing up.
Okay, Sir John, I'm going to stop you because we'll go back to Thornbury.
You can see, give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate is as follows. Samuel Carl Bromley, commonly known as Sam Bromley, the Conservative Party candidate, 8,675. Andrew Charles Brown, Liberal Democrats, 861. Damien James Egan, commonly known as Damien Egan, Labour Party, 11,176. That was 11,176. Lorraine Antoinette Francis, Green Party, 1,450. Rupert James Graham Lowe, Reform UK, 2,578. Nicholas David Wood, UKIP, People Not Politics, 129. The number of ballot papers rejected was as follows. Want of an official mark, 0. Voting for more than one candidate, 13. Writing or mark by which the voter could be identified, 1. Unmarked or void for uncertainty, 22, giving a total of 36 rejected ballot papers. The turnout figure across the constituency was 37.11%.
What we were just talking about, reform. What we were just talking about, reform. That changes the conversation. Okay. Right, ladies, I want your eyes on this, please. I'm going to pull up the result. That is a Labour gain from Conservative in Kingswood there, outskirts of Bristol. Pretty hefty one as well. I'm just going to pull up the link to it now. Let's have a look at this. Right, so, eyes on this, please. You have the Labour Party coming away with 45%, up 12 points on the last election. The Conservatives down 21 points at 35%. Reform, here it is. Look at those numbers. Reform at 10%, up 10 on the last election. Greens saving their deposit at 5.8%. They put on a few hundred votes from the 2019 election there. They saved their deposit, but that does not stop Labour from winning quite convincingly. Look at that. Labour 45, Conservative 35, Reform 10. And, oh, okay. That is not terrible for the Britain Predicts forecast. That is not terrible. That is not actually terrible. So, well done. Yeah, first of all, congratulations to the winning Labour candidate. Commiserations to the Conservative. But I think congratulations might be in order for the Reform candidate, because that 10% there is in line with the polling for the first time. Think of that. That's the first time we've seen the Reform vote share in a by-election in line with the polling. And the polling implies Reform is on 9%. So, something to consider there. Anyway, I'm going to just return you to the BBC's speech.
To show you that politics can be different and that it can make a difference. In Kingswood, as across the country, 14 years of Conservative government have sucked the hope out of our country. There's a feeling that no matter how hard you work, you just can't move forward. And that with Rishi's recession, we're left, again, paying more and getting less. It doesn't have to be this way. You know it, I know it, we all know it. And when the Prime Minister finally finds the courage to give the people a say, we're going to need each and every one of you, again, to come out and vote and make sure your voices are heard. Our country is at a crossroads. Under the Conservatives, we can choose more managed decline, more chaos, more division.
Sizable
or we can choose a changed Labour Party,
gain from Conservative.
A government that will put people first, that ensures a child's background isn't a barrier to their future,
first of all,
and that will rebuild Great
Labour,
Britain.
45%, which is what
the work to give Kingswood its future back starts now. Thank you again to everybody
Conservative
for your support.
5%, which is actually 3 points up in the poll.
So there we go. That is Damien
Egan. Just 2 points below. That is interesting. For once, I'm looking at this and I'm kind of thinking, okay, fine. Britain Predicts had it bang on. The polls had it bang on, but I'm also looking at the Conservative share just 3 points higher. Fine, fair. It's only 3 points, but that's something. That's not nothing. I'm actually quite fascinated by that there. Anyway, let's return to some music if we can. How do we get the music back on? Can we choose some good music? I don't know. What's the good music I would go for? Anyway, I don't know. Right. Okay. So yeah, that's some pretty sizable stuff there. I don't know how to read that. All I can say is, how do I see less often? I don't want that. Right. Let's just return to that. Yeah. A repeat of the result. Kingswood parliamentary by-election. Labour 45%. Conservatives 35. Down 21 points. Reform 10. That's polls based. And let's just talk about the polls then. Here's what the polls put things right now. Conservatives nationally down to 25%, down 19 points. Labour up on 44%. Lib Dems at 10%. Reform at 10%. Greens at 6%. What would that mean if an election was held now? Labour 408, more than 400 seats. Conservatives down to 150 to 160 seats, and the Lib Dems up to almost 30 seats. That I think the only way you can look at this is you can feel vindication for the polling. The polls are right. The polling is showing what we are showing now. The polling is bearing out rather in the by-elections. That's pretty something. You know, if you expect Labour to come away with 408 seats if an election was held today, the by-elections are indeed bearing that out, and you can just see how it changed over time. How in October 2021, Labour still had a 5-point lead, and then let's just remind ourselves then November 21, December 21, Owen Paterson scandal and everything else that therein lay, and Labour just jumps ahead, and it gets worse and worse, and Partygate. Oh, it just gets a little bit nastier. Boris compares Starmer, associates him with Jimmy Savile, and then Boris resigns. And then you get to a Labour lead of 10, 11 points. And then Liz Truss happens. Liz Truss stops happening, Rishi Sunak takes over, and you can see how the rest of politics has gone out since then. The numbers are pointing to a vindication of the polling, but you have to ask this. Why in parliamentary by-elections are they not showing... Why in parliamentary by-elections are they not showing a better result for the party than the polls implied? Which I know is almost like, it sounds like a very greedy bastard type of thing to say, but I get the impression that in by-elections gone by, the opposition tends to outperform the polling. Right now, the opposition is operating in line with the polling. Okay? Something to think about there. And let's just remind ourselves of who would actually win if an election was held today. Let's just go on to the... Oh, I need to sign in. Which is not a good thing to do. We will just get rid of that. So, yeah. We'll also answer some questions in a minute as well. Let me log in. What have we got here? David Boothroyd, election Anorak, says some reports that the Labour vote was 11151, but most say 11176. What did I hear? What did my spreadsheet say? Yeah, I got 176. Yeah, I definitely heard 176 from the returning officer. Okay, something to think about there. Yeah. Wait a minute, what's my password? Okay, apparently my password is not that. Anyway. Right, so yeah, can't show you my own forecast because I can't log into my account. But anyway, there we go, that's awkward. Why is there a flag by my name? I don't know. Anyway, right, yeah, so look, if an election was held now, 400 plus seats for the Labour Party, and once you account for tactical voting, which I've done in another video for the New Statesman, you're looking at 420 seats for the Labour Party. Emphasis, if an election was held now. There's good reason to think the polls could narrow in the next few months, next few weeks, whatever, or rather just emphasise if an election was held. But we don't know that with certainty. We can't say that with certainty because there are reasons to think, this is not the kind of normal election season. It's not the kind of normal election season that we perhaps expect. Because the country clamouring for such dramatic change, 2/3 of us to 70 to 75% of us saying this next election should be a change of government election. How do you overcome that? How do you pull back the numbers from that? Jazz Thandel asks, so you're saying Labour will win? Yeah, I think I'm probably saying that. Sophia says, back from the analysis, smaller swing than I thought, but that's still a lot of damage for a rushed campaign this seat. You say smaller swing, but yeah, when you consider that the Conservatives outperformed the polls in this seat by 3 percentage points, you do have to think, okay, yeah, objectively, obviously that is a smaller swing, but not by much, not by a huge amount. I think, are we quibbling over small numbers here? Because we're so used to the Conservatives crashing and burning on a day-by-day basis, the fact they crash and burn, but, only into, Everest instead of the deepest depths of the ocean, are we getting picky? I don't know. Maybe we are, but, something to think about there. Anyway, this is pretty sizable stuff, and I'll be honest with you, I'm sat here now. It hasn't really set in that Britain Predicts actually got this by-election quite close, pretty bang on, so I'm over the moon, really. And I agree, Sophia, Labour shouldn't complain about this. I'm just noting that, I'm sorry, I'm being really picky here, because in my head I'm kind of thinking, shouldn't Labour be outperforming the polls? I don't know, actually, should they? I don't know. The guy with the flag who doesn't know why he has the flag, do you think the general election will really happen the second half of 2024? Here's the thing. For everyone who knows me, declaration of interest, I'm a member of the Labour Party. I'm a Labour councillor. Not hiring taxis, but representing Chester city centre and the Garden Quarter. For those who have never been to Chester, I recommend you visit it. We need the tourists, we need the footfall, and I want to be seen as inciting more tourism to Chester. Anyway, where am I going with this? I don't know. Oh, what was the question? Do you think the general election will really happen the second half of 2024? Yeah, no. The reason I'm giving this declaration of interest is because obviously I work quite close with some people. I speak to a lot of people involved in the Labour Party, and there's a lot of people involved in the Labour Party who all say the same thing, which is that they are expecting the general election to come in May. Now that sounds okay. How many of you have been on Twitter for longer than 12 hours? How many of you are on Twitter for longer than 12 hours every day? Most of you, I think it's fair to say, and most of you would probably think when you hear that, the idea that the election will come in May is complete and utter bollocks. First of all, what turkeys vote for Christmas? And second of all, further to that, they want to wait it out, surely? They want to wait it out. Surely they would want to wait it out. But, I don't know. So when I have Labour MPs telling me the election's in May, it's absolutely in May. The logic is this: they want to make it a borders election, a boats election. They think, given their Rwanda bill will fail in the House of Lords, the Conservatives will feel vindicated to say, okay, let's make this an election about borders and nothing else. Let's pretend the cost of living crisis didn't happen. There are no issues in the economy. Inflation is not an election issue. They want to make it about immigration and immigration alone, because that is one of the few issues in which, while they are presently behind Labour on, they are relatively competitive, right? So where is your strike when you're in a period, a position in which you are falling behind in every single facet, every single strata, every single issue? You look at where you're relatively close, and immigration is it for the Conservatives, and that's probably why they would want to make an election about that. So that's the logic for the election in May. It fails the House of Lords. Rishi feels like he can, do this is a peers versus people type election. God, I've already created the line for them. Great. Peers versus people election. That actually sounds sounds quite right, actually. And they'll go to the polls. Makes sense, to be honest with you. Makes a lot of sense. But what turkeys vote for Christmas? Especially when you earn salaries as large as those. It doesn't make much sense. And so, that's why I think, in my heart of hearts, I still think it will be October or November. But who knows? Sami Baj from Canada. I live in Canada. It's funny to see the Conservatives doing well in the polls, but horrible in the UK. It's just anti-establishment, anti-incumbent, really. You go for the party that represents change from the norm, change from, that incites, entertains your desire for stop world I want to get off. Are all the parties, leading in the polls, or are they all providing the solutions? Well, I think that's a discussion for other people. Joe B off YouTube, where you can also join the discussion, says, will some of these reform voters be 2015 UKIP voters? Yeah, sure. Yeah, you've got to remember that 2015 UKIP voters have been on such a journey. A lot of them came out for Tony Blair's Labour in 1997. A lot of them stopped voting in 2001. A lot of them grew annoyed by Tony Blair's Labour in the run-up to 2005. Some of them went UKIP, some of them went Tory. A lot of them stayed at home. By 2010, a lot of them were going Lib Dem, a lot of them were going Tory, and then by 2015, they'd all gone naturally to UKIP. So you can see that long journey from New Labour to apathy to Lib Dem protest voting, bit of BNP, bit of Tory, bit of UKIP, to UKIP all the way in 2015. And since then, they've gone to Leave. They returned to apathy because UKIP voters are a bit like student voters, or 18 to 24-year-olds. So the 18 to 24-year-olds, a lot of progressive commentators like to think they are the route to a permanent progressive majority in Parliament. You know, if you just turn them out at election times. Never going to happen. But anyway, it's a dream for some people who, you know, get paid to write 600 words of guff. Anyway, UKIP voters are kind of like that. They only turn out in certain circumstances, when they're incited, when they're angry enough. And I would say, following the EU referendum, a lot of them started just staying at home. 2017, one of the reasons why Theresa May's Conservatives, you know, first of all, underperformed the polls, and two, let Corbyn's Labour come not too close, but relatively close, was because that Leave voters were more likely to stay at home than Remain voters. Now, we like to think, of course, that Leave voters felt comfortable voting Labour. That bit is true. For Corbyn's Labour in 2017, which, by the way, is a world away from Corbyn's Labour in 2019, the relationship on Brexit was very different. Sometimes I realise I don't know where I'm going with this point. What happened in 2017 was, Leave voters felt a lot more comfortable about their position, a lot more comfortable about being listened to, so a lot of them stayed at home. Some of them went to Corbyn's Labour, some of them went to May's Tories, but that split and that lack of incitement to turn out meant a closer general election result than forecast. Well, except the exit poll. 2019, however, after the Brexit wars, after Brexit chaos, those voters, a lot of those Leave voters, turned out in a lot greater anger. That, coupled with Labour, Remain and apathy, create the general election result we now see. I'm very conscious that I'm talking a bit too much, but I hope you're getting it. Hope you're understanding there. UKIP 2015 voters have been on a huge journey from New Labour to apathy to Lib Dem to Tory, Cameron's Tories to UKIP to Leave to apathy to Corbyn's Labour, or maybe not, or staying in apathy, to Boris's Tories to whatever. They've been all over the place, and I don't think you can necessarily box them in. Anyway, just to remind you of the result, let's get back to it. Kingswood, parliamentary by-election result. Labour, 45%, up 12 points. Conservatives, 35, down 21 points. Down 21 points. Reform, 10%. This is pretty sizable. It's the first time Reform has performed as well as the polls forecast. All credit to them. Actually, that's pretty good stuff. Green, saved deposit. I think we need to talk about this in the future. I'm going on the New Statesman podcast tomorrow at 10 a.m. to do some recording. I know it's just a saved deposit, and I know I'm kind of getting more excited about the smaller parties, but this is worth looking at. The fact that Labour, quite relatively convincingly, only by 10 points. My forecast said 12 points. Labour, for Labour to win this by 10 points and for the other parties to do just as well is interesting and bodes a lot for the future, basically. Let's see, can we answer any questions? It's nice to see Corbs for Life, hashtag Stop Starmer with the Palestine, Venezuela. I'm only getting, I don't know what the other flags are because I'm only getting the initials of it. Corbs for Life says May underperformed because of the Corbyn surge. He was only a couple of thousands of votes away from number 10. That's bollocks. But I know why. I know why you say that. You know, if certain votes in certain seats switched hands, yeah, you know that's not probable. You know that's not likely. It's you know, it's just maths, but it's not realistic maths. But okay, I remember reading that in 2017 too. It's bollocks. I mean, I don't know if you're a troll, but anyway. Noah asks, would you mind sharing some insight about my question a few moments ago? Just a curious American. happy to help a curious American. I love tourists. I'm sorry if I missed it, but do you think these Reform and UKIP votes generally go Tory instead? Hello, Noah. Thank you for joining the stream. Reform voters, they are radical. You know, they're voting for a party on the radical right. Very unhappy about immigration, borders, boats. They very much stop the world I want to get off. Two things to consider. They hate the establishment parties. And by establishment parties, of course, mean the Tories and Labour. When you ask them what they feel about the Labour Party, they absolutely hate them. When you ask them what they feel about the Conservatives, they hate them, but not absolutely hate them. When you ask them, if there wasn't a Reform candidate, how would you vote? Most would probably stay at home and not bother to engage with the process altogether. Think of them like Trump, a fair few Trump voters, if Trump wasn't on the ballot. Trump turns out people who otherwise wouldn't turn out. That's one of the reasons why he did so well in the Rust Belt states. Reform voters were a bit like that as well. And so if Reform wasn't there, a hefty chunk of them would just stay at home. Nevertheless, of those who do declare for another party, it's like, it would be for the Tories. But it's a small share. It's not huge. I think it was either YouGov or it's More in Common or another pollster. What they did was they found, yes, the overwhelming majority wouldn't know where they would go, or they would stay at home, and you'd have about between 15 and close to 30% of them would go to the Tories. 2% would go Labour, 1% would go Liberal, whatever. You get the general point that I'm trying to make here. They are a party. It's by and large, it's reform or bust. By and large, it's bust up the system or bust out of politics altogether. So the idea that, they can be squeezed, yes, they can be squeezed. They can, that 30% for the Conservatives could happen, but it's not much. It's not much. Hope that answers your question. David Batchelor, surely the recession really destroyed potential salience of small boats for the next few months. Surely, David, but people, press, front pages have different ideas, don't they? Corbs, no, I've already answered Corbs. What do we got? Dan Morris says Greens in Bristol and uni cities will be an issue. Absolutely, something to consider. Something to consider this. I want most of you political anorex to just cast your mind back to the when was it? Oh, the election I was elected in, the 2023 local elections. Labour did pretty well, and you had, which did irritate me slightly, had some other academics and pollsters and commentators come out and say Labour's underperforming in these local elections. They would get nowhere near a majority, or they would just miss out on one if the election was held now. And I looked at the results and I realised, no, that's not the case at all. What's happening is that in enough rural boroughs and enough seats around the country where Labour isn't competitive, votes are not going to Labour, they're going to other parties. So rural shire seats where, you'd think, okay, maybe Labour can come second here. Actually, local ground games for the Lib Dems, the Greens, they are, picking up so much support. You're not seeing Labour make any gains there, but you're seeing the Greens and Lib Dems do instead. What we saw in May 2023 last year is, I think, perhaps a glimpse into what we're going to see in the future, which is a pretty, it's anyone but Tory. ABT. That's what we're seeing in the country. ABT. And the enthusiasm for Labour isn't huge. It's pretty mixed. The favourability for the Labour brand is it's good. It's good. But it's I think Labour as a party is the most favourable brand of all parties, but there's a hefty number of Brits who still do not like the Labour brand. So whilst, it tops the poll for favourability in terms of party brand, the Labour brand, it also, the number of Brits who do not like the brand is pretty high too as well. Second most popular brand is the Green Party. But the number of Brits who do not like the Green Party brand is next to non-existent, or rather it's quite low. So if you're talking net favourability towards party brands, the Greens run away with it and Labour comes second. Okay. Point I'm trying to make here is the Labour brand, whilst in the net positive, they're going to get into government. They're going to win the next election if, of course, we don't have, a nuclear war or some other local disturbance. You're going to have a Labour government, but you're going to have a sort of electorate willing to consider other parties. It is ABT. In most seats, the ABT option is Labour, but immediately after that, once the ABT the ABT trait, once that dies, voters may go searching elsewhere, and enough university seats that might be for the Greens or the Lib Dems, as we saw in Hull earlier today. Let me just show you another result. So we have Kingswood there, hefty vote, 25,000 votes cast there. Just want to take you to a council by-election down here, Kingston upon Hull. Council by-election result. Okay, only a few votes cast, but Lib Dem gain from Labour. There is a sizable Lib Dem strength in Hull, Kingston upon Hull. It's just bloody Hull. Come on. That's built on something. There is, if Labour was so popular with the country, that wouldn't be happening. Okay. Anyway. I've got a lot more to show you, and I have so many charts. So disaster due, we have the Kingswood result in, which is pretty much in line with what the polls show. So polls imply Labour is on course of 400 and something seats. A fact of a tactical voting, you're getting close to 450 seats. Actually, I'll be honest with you, it's not out of the realms of possibility that, on current polling, the Conservatives could fall to 100, if not below that. But, of course, I think we all agree that the polls will narrow once the election is called, because the Tory base rallies, or rather the government's base almost always rallies when an election season comes about. I need to emphasise, though, almost always, not always. That's something we need to talk about soon. Labour suffers decline in Muslim support. I think the Survation poll, it definitely is worth a salt. Always hard to sample minority voters, because you don't know what kind of Muslim is turning out at the ballot box. You don't know if it's of a certain ethnicity. You don't know if it's geographically concentrated. You always got to be careful. Anyway, that's another thing as well. Rishi's reset. I was doing this quite cheekily. Start of February. What were the polls showing? When I say now, it's pretty much, start of February, which is now as well. Barely any change. What's changed? Nothing. Trouble in Kingswood. This is something I wanted to consider. Actually, it does feed in what I was trying to say here, is that, the ABT vote, the anyone but Tory vote, is, not insubstantially first preferencing parties other than Labour. So in the local elections in May, local elections, by the way, that I argue indicated Labour was on course for a pretty comfortable majority, in Kingswood, it was votes for the smaller parties, the quarter that went for the Lib Dems and Greens, that, in first past the post would have stopped Labour short here. Nevertheless, we know that's not going to happen in a general election, because people do vote tactically. Tactical voting has been here since time immemorial. It's just been popularised now because it's disproportionately anti-Tory. Labour game forecast, that is pretty much, Are the polls overstating reform? This is an argument I have long been making. Now, however, I might need to reassess. I'm going to spend some time looking at this, because, mind you, this data is a few months out of date. We're talking, when did I make this chart? October, I think? Yeah, I think it was. We need to look at that. We definitely need to look at that. Because if we're seeing, increased reform support amongst low attention and mid-attention voters, we can say, okay, fine, it's genuine. I need to look at that. I'm going to look at that later. Anyway, this is one point I wanted to make about Wellingborough. Could Wellingborough be tougher than Tamworth? Maybe. Maybe not. Because you will notice in Wellingborough, in local elections, the Labour vote has been pretty low, pretty solid. Well, okay, pretty low and pretty unlikely to shift by a few points or more. In Tamworth, meanwhile, you had Labour becoming incredibly competitive with the Tories in 2014. In 2013, in Wellingborough, Labour was nowhere near. And that suggests in Wellingborough it could be a tougher fight than Tamworth. Tamworth, by the way, which went Labour by only 5 percentage points. Now, Well, let's move to the chart that I really wanted to show you here today. Tracking Labour's lead. I've advertised this on social media before, and I want your eyes on it again. So I always make this argument. If you want to know how healthy Labour's lead is, really, don't just look at voting intention. Look at Labour's lead on the economy. Look at everything else. Look at Keir Starmer's own lead in terms of likability over the Prime Minister, and look at Keir Starmer's own net approval. I talked about Labour's brand approval. Let's look at Keir Starmer's own approval as well. And joy of using Data Wrapper is they do release some pretty good features sometimes, and this is one such feature. Look at this. So, February, 10th of February, I know it's a week out of date, but I sincerely doubt the numbers have changed that much. Let me just take a sip of coffee. Labour lead 19 points in voting intention. On the economy, they're up 10 points over the Tories, which is pretty sizable. But when you compare it to, let's say the vaccine rollout, period of the vaccine rollout, yeah, look at that Tory lead, 18-point Tory lead on the economy, even though they were only 4 points ahead on voting intention. But anyway, let's return to where we are now. Labour leader on voting intention, 19 points. On the economy, 10 points. Starmer's own lead over Sunak, 11 points. But, yeah, it's definitely a rise, definitely an increase there. You look at this one here, this little narrowing here. This was the news story that I think has been reported or was reported as a story Rishi Sunak was really disappointed didn't net him as much as he thought it would, and that's Northern Ireland. What he got on Northern Ireland, I remember writing it, will Northern Ireland save Sunak? And I said no, because voters are not bothered about Northern Ireland, I'm going to be honest with you. And you do see that Starmer's lead over Sunak fell from 9 points to 5 points from March through to April, and that was Northern Ireland. And a bit of stuff about boats as well, but yeah, not much gain for Sunak there. But since then, since May, June, July, Suella Braverman, Rwanda, what else has happened? Yeah, Starmer's lead over Sunak has widened considerably. Although do notice since December it has narrowed a little bit, but again, 1 percentage point. Starmer's own favourability has been stubbornly in the net positive, but only by a few points. Not much at all. Nothing much to talk about there. And this is the thing to consider. Starmer's lead here is 2 points. 2 points over Starmer's likability. Let me put this in a different way. The share of Britons who like Keir Starmer is 2 points greater than the share of Britons who dislike him. Fine. You get that? We'll understand that there. And compare that, though, to the share of Britons who liked David Cameron against the share who didn't. And this is a poor figures for Starmer. Cameron in the run-up to the 2010 election had, I think, if I remember rightly, it was like 50 to 55% liking him, 30 to 35% not. So what's that? 20-point leads, whereas Starmer has a 2-point lead here. And this isn't necessarily, Starmer having more people dislike him than the number of Brits who disliked David Cameron. It's rather, whereas 20% of Britons didn't really have an opinion of David Cameron in 2010, it's more like 30% don't really have an opinion on Keir Starmer in 2024. Something to think about there. If you want to look at Labour's weakest asset, it's not its party brand per se, it's not its lead on the economy, it's perhaps the Labour leader himself. Something to think about there. Anyway, shall we get to answering some questions? So, Fairly Sad Panda says, cross samples like these are voodoo. Is that Sims 1 music man of culture? Yes, I've also got Sim City as well, and just a load of other things. I just put it in one day because I think Sims music is, it's good background stuff anyway. First past the post is so in need of abolition. Is it? Maybe it is. Maybe I've swallowed is it the red pill now that I've been elected under first past the post? I don't know. Dan says Starmer does have the Biden vibe, hard to be excited about, but better than the alternative. Exactly that. And something to consider. Definitely want to give some eyes to this in a bit, which is this. Biden is up against Donald Trump. obviously, we know that. Nikki Haley's dead and buried. All power to her for trying, anyway. He's up against the man for whom we, on this side of the pond, think, was an absolute terror for the Western world, by and large. Most Britons think that, at least. But Americans don't necessarily think of what Trump was, rather as much as perhaps we do. Something to bear in mind is that American voters, when they look at Trump, they are not necessarily thinking, sitting high in the heads, those who like him, what he was like in his previous presidency. A lot of them, it sort of doesn't factor as much as perhaps it should. And so I think Starmer could face that soon. So right now, Starmer's Labour is enjoying the wave of ABT, anyone but Tory. Once Starmer's Labour enters Downing Street, that fear factor of, getting all the votes together under ABT will dissipate slightly, will die somewhat. And what that means is this coalition of supporters who came out for Starmer's Labour may look further afield, and that's what you might see in increased Green votes in the university cities, in the rural shires, and you may see the Lib Dems try to mount a comeback in some certain parts of London, in Sheffield, in Manchester maybe, Hull. Where else could the Lib Dems do well? Maybe Leeds, maybe Birmingham. If the Lib Dem relationship with certain Muslim voters is reset, it could be done. So ABT is something that is certainly propelling Starmer to number 10, but it could very quickly take him out of it if, of course, as a factor, it just dies away so quickly. Flagman asks, when's the Wellingborough vote? Let's find out. Is it due anytime soon? Not seeing it. Yeah. We don't really know yet. We're not seeing anything yet. We should expect in about an hour or so. But yeah. That's interesting. John Stevens of the Mirror is saying Tory spin on Wellingborough and Kingswood. Both of these seats have been Labour recently. And I just want to put that fact out here, which John has illustrated. The last time Labour won Wellingborough was 23 years ago. Kingswood was 19 years ago. So when Tory spin doctors say both of these seats have been Labour recently, I can also say I was recently in nappies, which I don't ever want to say again, actually, to be honest with you. Labour, Wellingborough was, in terms of recently Labour, that was 23 years ago. I'm 28. Shit. Yeah, okay, fine. And Kingswood was 19 years ago. Was it? Well, the last time Kingswood was represented by a Labour MP was 14 years ago. Last time Wellingborough was represented by Labour was 20 years ago, 19 years ago. Anyway, yeah. So point still stands. Yes, the idea that this is, these seats have been recent Labour, absolutely for the birds. But mind you, the last time Labour recently won an election is also for the birds too. Labour's coming back in quite a big way, and substantially so. But they're also seeing other votes for the smaller parties, for reform. First time polling has been vindicated for the reform. First time, one time, but, something to consider. Dan Hodges tweets, Richard Tice tells me Reform are on for their best two results. They probably are. They probably are tonight, yeah. All power to them there. Yeah, it's interesting to finally see some sort of development in support for reform. And I just want to go back to this chart, if I could show you. Where are we? Yeah, Wellingborough, thanks Sophia and Dan. Wellingborough is probably ready at 3, so what's that, half an hour from now? Can you tell I'm quite tired? Okay. Anyway, I just want to stick back to this chart here. Are the polls overstating reform? This chart is probably, the date is probably from October. And actually, while we're here, maybe we could actually look at this. I'm gonna pull up the chart now. I'm gonna get on an opinion poll. This is from October, and what it shows is the reform vote is disproportionately based among high attention voters. The argument is there are too many of these voters, high attention voters, in the samples. high attention voters pay a lot of attention to the news. They're very logged on. And, you know, when you're disproportionately represented, however this vote is split is overrepresented too. And so you could then argue, yes, maybe reform is being overrepresented there, given you've got 6% and 3% amongst medium and low attention voters respectively. Something to also consider is among low attention voters, the share of support for the Greens, 13% there, complete inverse of what we're seeing amongst reform voters. It's a surprise. Dan, you've just said you were quite surprised at the high attention for reform. When I say high attention voters, what are we thinking? I wouldn't think of high attention voters as necessarily people, you know, who buy The Guardian every day or read a paper every day. It's the kind of people who are, long story short, very online and very, by online could be, you know, you're on Facebook or how about this? They tell themselves and they tell the pollsters they have a high attention to politics. People who have a high attention to politics tend to have a lot of opinions about politics. People who have a lot of opinions about politics, well, seems like they trend for right-wing parties. Look at that, 25, 30, 37% of high attention voters go for the Conservatives or Reform against 42 for Labour. Whereas low attention voters, people who don't really care about politics, who just want to vote, you have 19 plus 3, that's 22%, 1 in 5 going for right-wing parties against 53. Well, 66% for parties on the relative left. Yeah, something to think about there. It's self-selecting this, you know, whether you consider yourself high attention or low attention. Would I consider myself high attention voter? Yeah, I have to now. My parents wouldn't. My parents are not high attention voters by any stretch. Anyway, while we're here, I'm just going to try and see if I can find opinions figures, see if we can get an update of this. Because if it's the case that that what we're seeing here, you know, overrepresented amongst high attention voters, but not amongst low or mid, the Reform share. If I can get updated figures and I can find that it's pretty equal across the board, then you know what? The polls aren't necessarily overstating Reform. They're just actually reflecting them for once, finally. Well, they already were anyway. I'm going to have a look. I don't know where... Trying to find where Opinion keep all their tables, and they move their link around a lot, or rather they make it a little bit hard to find, which is quite annoying. Anyway, so yeah, what else can I show you here? Could have said that. I've tracked Labour's lead. Yeah, look at that. Strong Labour lead in voting intention, comfortable on the economy, comfortable over the PM, but Starmer's own net approval is not ideal. Could be better. Anyway, the time is now 2:34. We are looking at maybe half an hour to a declaration, and I won't lie to you, I'm absolutely exhausted. I got up at 7 a.m. today. Like I said, I'm a Labour Party councillor. We were just moving stuff into our new campaign HQ, which was a complete pain for me to find, but we got it in the end. Moving all that was a lot of blood, tears and sweat, and then I had my full council in the evening, which was just painful, listening to a lot of councillors get up and tell me why green bin charges are tantamount to the suppression of democracy in Ukraine. You know, council meetings can be absolutely balmy sometimes. Anyway, I'm trying to find these tables right now. Where are they? Not sure. Can't find it. Never mind then. What else can I show you? How about this? Let's go back to the wonderful, wonderful map that I'm very, very keen on. This is the ward by ward map that I've long built. The model, the Britain Elects, my own model that I've tried to say is, here's how every ward probably voted at the last general election. Which, unsurprisingly, is incredibly blue. And what I used this for, primarily, was to calculate the new how the new boundaries would have voted at the last election. Colin Rallings and Michael Thrasher did their own version, and mine is, basically pretty much the same. Actually, I don't think there's any seat we call differently. But one thing I do notice is that this is the only resource that tells you how your ward probably voted. Electoral Calcus have a go, but they put a lot of their stuff behind hard to reach links. Anyway, let's just give consideration to the fact where Labour has just won. Kingswood, South Gloucestershire. Technically in South Gloucestershire, but once you zoom in there, you do realise this is the outskirts of Bristol. So, Kingswood itself, at the last general election, voted Conservative 50% to 40%. It's the edges of Kingswood that were very quite sizably Labour. But it's these suburbs, Woodstock, Hanham, New Cheltenham, Parkwall and Warmley, maybe mispronouncing this, I probably am, Cadbury Heath, that's easier to pronounce, Longwell Green. It's these types of seats, these types of wards. I want to know how Longwell Green actually voted. Oh, is that actually going to be in the seat? Anyway, it's these types of areas you saw big swings away from the Conservatives to Labour, and we're talking suburbia. Suburban England saw sizable swings from from the Conservatives to Labour. And what will that mean for other parts of the country? I always like to pick on Rugby here. Rugby is a place that at the last general election, only one ward out of the total, what's that, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, a dozen almost, voted Labour. Only one ward, and comically it's the Ben ward, B-E-N-N. So yeah, I wonder if that's in recognition for a certain Benite. Anyway, yeah, these types of wards, outskirts, suburbia, they need to be won by Labour. It's these neighbourhoods that Labour needs to be striking gold with, in places like Rugby, in places like Welling Garden City, in Stevenage. Stevenage, let's not forget, in 2010, 2015 was meant to be a battleground seat between Conservatives and Labour, and at the last general election, every single neighbourhood you could imagine voted for the Conservative candidate. Maybe tight in certain places, as we see, there in Bedwell ward, 46% Conservative, 43% Labour, but Tories top the poll in them. And when that happens in general elections, it does embolden your party to target those areas in a local election. So here in Chester, for instance, Chester was a pretty safe-ish hold for Labour in 2019, and in what was Hanbridge Park ward, which is south of the River Dee, Labour just about edged the Conservatives to top the poll here. Now, Labour saw this locally and thought, okay, right, we can get the council seat. The councillors are popular locally, but you know what, if we put in the resources we can, and they did. And in May last year, Labour struck gold and got, about 100 vote majority over one of the Conservative councillors. Now Hanbridge Park in councillor seat terms is a split ward. It's these general election results that sort of tell you, if you're a local party in the area, here's probably, if we're not winning the council seat in council elections, here's probably where we can target. I also do note that in this preview of the map I'm showing, I do include the alleged notional, I suppose, ward results for the 2019 election in Scotland, which I haven't yet published, but will soon. I've been meaning to do that for quite some time. I've just never got round to it. Something to consider: Hartlepool. In the by-election, in the parliamentary by-election, almost every single one of these neighbourhoods and wards, the by-election in 2021, almost every single one of these neighbourhoods and wards went to the Conservatives. I only think it was this one, Victoria Ward, or was it Foggy Firs? Yeah, no, I think it was Victoria Ward. That was the only ward in the 2021 by-election that went Labour. Every single one of them, every one you can see here, that was red in 2019, went blue in 2021. Seaton was, I think, the only ward in Hartlepool, it seems, where the Brexit Party, Richard Tice himself, probably topped the poll. Although the Brexit Party, I just want to point out, most likely did top the poll in 2 other wards in the 2019 general election. The Royston ward in Barnsley North. Well, these are the new parliamentary seats. And Hoyland Milton in what is now going to be Barnsley South. So, yeah, pretty interesting that, I find. And then, of course, in Chorley, Lindsay Hoyle's constituency, you do have overwhelming votes for Lindsay Hoyle, listed as other. Where is the Wellingborough by-election? And also, I want to play some better music. I do have another streaming playlist we can do here. What can we do? Where is it? Anyway, Dan Moore asks, can you have a quick look at Devon? I think there's going to be a sea change there. Devon, why wasn't going to be a sea change in Devon? Well, maybe. Yeah, always remember this. Okay, I went to Tiverton in 2022. We had the Tiverton and Honiton by-election. Tiverton and then going all the way down to Honiton over here. Yeah, boundary changes do change things up a little bit. Actually, let me see if I can find it. Boundary changes, Ben Walker, State of the Nation. Let's see if we can get it. Here we go. Alright, I've got to sign in again. I don't know what is my password. Ben Walker, New Statesman. Newstatesman.co.uk. Oh, I logged in. I just probably did the password wrong. Anyway, right, so yes, new boundaries in Devon. Going to be absolutely fun, aren't they? What happens to Tiverton and Honiton? Split up completely. You have Honiton and Sidmouth, or Sidmouth, and then you have Tiverton and Minehead. How's that going to go? That's going to be very fun. Yeah, you're going to see what the Lib Dem vote, which is concentrated here. Is it going to create some noise in Honiton and Sidmouth? I don't know how that works. But you do notice that 15% for another person there. That's an independent there in Honiton and Sidmouth, which is the old part of the old East Devon seat, which, forget her name, the independent candidate got a sizable vote in. Well, a lot of that seat goes into Exmouth or Exmouth and Exeter East, which is Conservative 50%, other, i.e. independent, 35%. That is going to be, that's going to be interesting. Now, the Lib Dems, when they had strength in Devon, it was a lot here, wasn't it? Torridge, Tavistock, and of course North Devon, which is, Barnstaple and Ilfracombe. It is Ilfracombe, isn't it? Not Ilfracombe. I went there once to be a tourist for a bit, so yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. The southwest is going to be very interesting because you are going to see a lot of Lib Dem return. Quite clearly they have strength in Tiverton and Honiton, also in Frome and East Somerset, and inevitably probably in Glastonbury and Somerton. Then you have to consider the fact that Cornwall's going to be doubly interesting, given in Camborne and Redruth and Truro and Falmouth, Labour could come back, strike gold there. Look at that. Truro and Falmouth, Conservative 46%, Labour 38%, and that was in the 2019 election. 2019, you know? Labour's closer in some bits of Cornwall than they are in the old Lancashire coalfields and Yorkshire coalfields. At the last election, I mean. You know, that's something to bear in mind. Camborne and Redruth as well. You can see two easy Labour gains there. Will that happen? And then, of course, Johnny Mercer's own seat of Plymouth Moorview. Conservative 60%, Labour 32%. I don't think the boundaries changed that much, if at all, there. But anyway. Fairly Sad Panda says the southwest will be very weird at the G. If there's a place that could swing all at once, it would be there. Blue to red and yellow. Yeah, absolutely. You're going to have Filton and Bradley Stoke, which is another kind of Bristol outskirts seat that I think Labour should be gunning for, and quite convincingly. Kingswood, that of course Labour just won in a by-election, is going to be part of the new Bristol North East seat, but also the North East Somerset and Hanham seat, which a certain Mr. Rees-Mogg is presently representing a significant portion of, so wonder how that goes. If it's in his intention to stand in this seat, I think it's fair to say, if you're talking of Portillo moments, as Jay Hacker is on Twitter, this might be it. North East Somerset and Hanham. Labour should be gunning for that. But also for Portillo moments, yes, as one of you says on the chat, Portsmouth North. But look at what it was at 2019. In 2019, Conservative 61%, Labour 27%. That's a really tall order, isn't it? At least in those number terms. It should be a tall order. But, I don't know. Thank you, Sophia. Mogg has confirmed he is standing for the seat of North East Somerset and Hanham. I think we just need to, take stock and look at how this country voted in 2019, because it was, let's not beat around the bush, cataclysmic for any party other than the Conservatives. The collapse in votes for Labour was just huge in so many seats. Going from what used to be safe seats to either marginals or safe Tory seats, as we saw in certain parts of Morley. Yeah, look at that. Leeds South West and Morley, Conservative 51%, Labour 39%. This was old Ed Bull's old seat, and this includes parts of Leeds South West. Different days. Let me go back to chat. What was it? Amazing what 5 years of war, famine, death and disease does. I remember the 2019 election. I remember that was the first time I was invited to go down to the New Statesman offices for the election night. So I was doing a lot of work already, a lot of consultancy work for a few people. But it was at that time that I decided the New Statesman and I decided to do something together. And it involved spending election night in their office. Now you would think, am I going to spend the election night with anybody? No, it was just me and 3 friends just sat in an office together with some laptops and telly. And did we actually eat anything? I don't know, some chocolate fingers or whatever. And I remember there was a pervading feeling during a part of the campaign that did think, okay, right, Labour has a capacity to surge again, as it did in 2017. Was this wishful thinking on my part? I don't know, to be honest with you. I think I have a capacity to look above my own partisan prejudices, but anyway, I was always telling myself that during 2019, clearly Labour does have a capacity to do it again if it wants to, and we did see that in the 2019 general election, during the campaign polling, there was pretty strong sign that, it was going up from 29% to 32%, 3 points, and you thought maybe it could do better than that. And I thought, yeah, maybe it could. And Stephen Bush did write his own piece, which did say, we are only a margin of error away from a hung parliament, because the polls at the time did show pretty convincing Tory majority, and the polls were vindicated in that general election. Anyway, I remember going down there that night thinking, yeah, okay, maybe Labour could outperform by a little bit its polls, but nevertheless we should consider the fact that if the numbers do move, if the seats do change, the Tories could eke out a slim majority. And when I saw the numbers, I did think, oh Christ, Labour has ballsed it up. And I remember getting a call from a very frantic organiser for one of the Labour marginal seats saying, I've lost, haven't I? And I did say, well, actually, it was quite a middle-class battleground seat. And I did say, no, actually, you probably haven't lost, because think of the votes that are turning to the Conservatives now. They're Leave voters. Look at your seat. You have so few Leave voters, you don't need to worry. And in the end, that seat actually did hold for Labour. So I was thinking, throughout that campaign, maybe there could have been a comeback for Labour, but no, actually, the polls were vindicated for good reason as well. Anyway, yeah, those were different days. I remember the 2017 one. That was interesting, because I was looking at that and I was thinking, it doesn't feel like this. The polls are moving. I remember the activity was just huge. It was significant, the change in the numbers. How in Wales, I was always paying attention to Welsh voting intentions then, because in April you had the Tories in Wales overtake Labour, sort of some pretty impressive heights, and then by about the start of May, middle of May, complete role reversal. Labour started surging again in Wales, to the point that you did think, well, actually, Labour are doing just as well in Wales as they were in the 2015 election. Oh, now they're doing better than in the 2015 election. Oh, now it's no longer competitive. Oh, they might actually pick up some seats. And I remember getting into the start of June and I was thinking, shit, we don't know. We don't know. Things were moving differently. There was a lot of regional variation. You saw in certain parts of the northeast and bits of Yorkshire, the swing was still against Labour. But in certain parts of the south, the swing was actually going away from the Tories towards Labour. Okay, so in the north it was against Labour, in the south it was towards Labour, and that was vindicated. But I just didn't know. I couldn't work out that it would mean the Tories would lose enough seats for it to be a hung parliament, for Labour to hang on with 250. That was pretty sizable. And I was living in Chester at the time. I was at university, and I remember the Labour campaign in Chester, which, you know, bear in mind, Chester in 2015 was the most marginal seat in the country, 90 vote majority, I think it was, and the campaign was just everywhere. There were few streets where you didn't see either a Labour board or some Labour activists hauled in from Liverpool or wherever, trying themselves on the country. But yeah, 2017 was an election that I think we could have seen, the result you could have seen if you looked at regional variation. 2019 was a result that I think, whilst the polling vindicated it, the scale of which in certain old Labour seats, that was a bit more traumatised. That should have been more traumatising for Labour than the polling would have implied, and it was absolutely disastrous for Labour. 2015, trying to remember that one. Oh God, I was paying a lot of attention to the rise of UKIP then, because I thought they could do really well, score probably 1, 2, 3 seats, Clacton, Thurrock, Thanet, and they almost did. I thought the Greens could have maybe done. Bristol West almost did as well. The collapse for the Lib Dems, I thought, even in their own seats, was the surprise, I think. For them to, you know, in places like Eastleigh that they held in a by-election in 2013, in places like, where else are we talking? Stockport, was it? Yeah. Was it Montgomeryshire? No, they already lost that in 2010. You know, for them to just fall in almost every corner of the country and hang on to only 8 seats was a bit of a surprise. I remember Ian Dale of LBC fame, and other reasons for being famous. He did a seat-by-seat prediction in 2015, predicting trying to basically a finger in the air guess, and I think he put out like 20 to 30. The Lib Dems should hold about 20 plus seats, and I thought probably reasonable, because we overstated. I think everyone, commentator or otherwise, overstated Labour's Lib Dems, the capacity for personal votes. They exist, but they're not huge. And I always take this point. Maybe I've looked at too many local council elections in multi-member seats, but personal votes can, in a turnout of 2,000 votes, can be as much as 100 to 200 votes. So 5 to 10%, which can make all the difference, I suppose. But I don't know. Sophia says the 2015 exit poll actually predicted the Greens to take Norwich south off the Lib Dems until Labour gaining it. I do remember that. Yeah. I remember in 2013-14, the Greens doing really well in Norwich council elections, but actually I think in 2014 they did quite poorly. In 13 they did brilliantly, in 14 they did poorly. And I think it was then that I was thinking maybe they couldn't do it, but I don't remember that well anyway. What we got? A fairly sad panda. Only people who really benefit from a predictable and boring campaign this year is probably the LDs, but the US political situation is how it is. Should we talk about America, actually? Should we have just a little chat? Given conscious that we are, how far are we out from Wellingborough? Any news there? What have we got here? No, I'm not seeing anything about Wellingborough just yet. Mind you, you know, if there's one thing I can complain about quite loudly to everybody, it's that since Elon Musk has taken over Twitter, Twitter has gone to the dogs. That's not news. Everyone agrees with that anyway. But if you, like me, are a political / news junkie, that you have to use something called TweetDeck, which basically, imagine a Twitter feed next to another Twitter feed, next to another, and another, and they all update in real time. Elon Musk pretty much ruined that, and he decided to put it behind a paywall, which, for my sins, I am paying for, and restricted to only one account, which does slow down my ability to get things out. But anyway, what Musk has done to Twitter has been absolutely atrocious. If I can give you a sort of insight that maybe I shouldn't be sharing data on, but stuff it. I can say this for a fact: since Elon Musk took over Twitter, traffic to my own articles has fallen, right? And I've had to look further afield. I've had to advertise further afield. I do still get a lot of decent traffic, but definitely saw a decline since the arrival of Elon Musk. And in social media terms, we do need to think of a proper Twitter alternative. This idea that we can have multiple different kinds of Twitters, Threads, Mastodon, Blue Sky. What are the others? I don't know anymore. I'm forgetting them. Is a bit silly, because I think you need one in one place. The idea that you are a public space, a town hall square of different types of people is actually, I think, the best thing you can sort of do. But anyway, Dan Morris says counting's still going on, so we'll be a while yet. Counting's still going on. Oh bloody hell! Dan says he uses LinkedIn for articles. Who uses LinkedIn? Oh, it's people who just absolutely. I despise LinkedIn to a T. Spoutable. What's spoutable? My coffee's cold now, which I'm not over the moon about. Anyway, I'm quite visibly getting tired, which is not great. Oh yeah, I can see my hair is getting quite chaotic. So yeah. Anyway, spoutable. Join the new era of social media. Everyone is the new era of social media. Buzz off. Right, what we got? I'm not seeing much. Not seeing much right now. Alexandreo, is it Alexandreo? Alexandreo says, pretty hard to argue there's no Tories switching to Labour as the Tories have been doing all night. Don't think, I imagine Conservative spinners would probably make the argument that there are few people switching from the Conservatives to Labour. Of course, that is by and large rubbish today, but I would make the point that about 2 years ago, there were very few people, 2 years ago, actually, let's do it in chart term. Let's get it up. Where are we? Here. So where are we now? 24, 23, 22. Let's go here. Okay? 2 years ago, where were the polls? Labour's lead on the economy? Nowhere. Tories had a lead on the economy 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Labour had an 8-point lead over the Conservatives. Keir Starmer had a 4-point lead over Boris Johnson, but Keir Starmer was 7 points more disliked than liked. Okay? Now, I remember looking at these polls back then, and I noticed that the transfers from Tory to Labour were next very small. 3-4% of Tory 29ers were going Labour. A lot of this was Tory apathy, and I remember saying that in every New Statesman podcast that happened. There were few transfers. This Labour lead was pretty weak. And then you did see, I did remember making the argument at this point that a lot of this was Tories staying at home. And I think it got to about May or June. It's like, even though the Labour lead had actually declined, you were seeing transfers from the Tories to Labour actually go up. And this is something you always got to remember. Obviously, Labour's lead, surged, and the proportion of Tories to Labour has surged as well. But it's worth bearing in mind that during 2022, Labour, whilst eking out relatively small but comfortable leads over the Conservatives, developed their appeal from being just, profiting off Tory apathy to actually taking Tory votes. And you don't see that in the headline numbers. I really do need to find a way to show you that, because it did happen throughout 2022, even though the headlines won't show you it. Anyway, as Alex Andro, who I can't pronounce his surname, so sorry, has said, anyway, I think there is very little doubt now. There is very little doubt now that the Conservatives are shedding support to the Labour Party. Anyway, get another question from a new commenter, how can I pronounce that? Someone on YouTube, Shekzek32. Could Reform plausibly claim they took votes from the Conservatives? Oh, absolutely. They could claim well, should we get back to the result? Where is it? Kingswood parliamentary result. Let's just remind ourselves. Labour 45, Conservative 35, Reform 10. Yeah, I mean, if you just looked at the percentage changes, which, are an easy, simple barometer, not advisable because there's always churn in elections, but, hypothetically, you can quite easily claim, look at that. Reform took Tory votes. They definitely did talk Tory votes. What proportion of the Reform vote is formerly Tory? I think a fair chunk. If you look at the national polls, a fair, almost overwhelming chunk of it is. I would always make the point, though, that a lot of it could be non-voters coming out in an angry fashion again. I'll be honest with you, I'm not drawing a blank per se, but I am saying this. Need to go to the drawing board, have a look at this, need to have a look at where this is coming from, because I think it could have some profound implications. Well, maybe not profound implications, but enough to see, not enough for us to say with some confidence how much of this can be squeezed back to the Conservative column. Because if a lot of it can, that changes the dynamic sizably. But if you look at, surveys that I've mentioned before, so little of it probably is. Probably 3 in 10 of it, so that's 3 points. So we get a Kingswood result that is, lab gain by 10 points to lab gain by 7 points at best for the Conservatives. But hey, you know what? In election forecast, which Labour are currently on course for 400 plus seats for, that could, cut it down to 400. That could be something. I think squeezing the Reform vote, maybe I'm just tired. It is 3 a.m. now. We are at 3 minutes past 3, and we're still waiting for the Wellingborough parliamentary by-election result. Maybe I'm looking at this and kind of thinking, if the margins move in the right direction, if the stars align for the Conservatives, Labour could be denied a lot of seats. Not enough to, lose the election, but quite enough to maybe, cut Labour's, number of seats in the House of Commons down from 450 to 390. Maybe. It's possible. Something to consider. Something to have a think about. I don't know. What else we got? We got Dan Morrow. Thank you for staying with us, Dan. You've been excellent company tonight. Do non-voters really come out in by-elections? Good question. Don't know. Do non-voters really come out in by-elections? Yeah, actually. Yeah, sometimes they can. Sometimes they can. Something to bear in mind. What was UKIP's vote? Angry. A lot of angry people coming out in certain elections. Or rather, I wouldn't say not in by-elections, certain circumstances. So the EU referendum, of course, wasn't a by-election. It wasn't low turnout. It was high turnout. But it incited a certain kind of person to come out in the certain circumstance that the EU referendum was. But that was a high-attention election. Actually, maybe the comparison's a bit void there. Is there evidence in the past? I would always say just look at the UKIP vote and try and see what proportion of that was non-voters coming out. Nigel Farage, who, for all his faults in belief, I actually think is often on the money in engaging certain sections of public opinion. Not always, by any stretch of the imagination. I think his obsessions with lockdowns, with certain refugees during lockdown, was completely out of kilter with public opinion. But, I think he can smell the changing. I think he can sense the changing winds. And he did always say in, early 2010s, a lot of what UKIP was gaining were non-voters, people who were enjoying Tony Blair in 1997, as I say, but they were turned off by Iraq, turned off by immigration in 2004, 2005, and either stopped voting, went for the radical / far right, and then either stopped voting again, and then came out for UKIP in 2013, 14, 15. Yeah. So, yeah. Mike McMahon. Oh, I can't pronounce things anymore. They don't all go Tory. I don't know what the context is there, but just if I can sort of fill in the gaps. No, Reform voters don't all go Tory. As some evidence suggests, you know, if Reform voters were all squeezed at the next election, maybe as much as 30% would go Tory, but really that's a bit of a reach. That's quite a you know, how would I describe it? A tough ask. Anyway, so yeah, let me get to my coffee. Good try. I'm really quite poor at pronouncing things. So, oh my god, I'm sorry. I'm just looked at myself in the stream and I realise I'm looking quite tired. So yeah. Anyway, where on earth is Wellingborough? No sign yet. I don't think we even get any extra indication from, at least from my usual sources. What do we got? Something to consider. David Boothroyd, who is an election anorak, and a lot of what he says is bang on, or just really interesting. If Labour wins the Wellingborough by-election with a majority of 7,000 or more votes, the swing will exceed the highest Conservative to Labour by-election swing on record, which was the Dudley West swing in 1994. So, yeah. Or, well, if it wins with a majority of 6,900 or more, it could exceed the biggest by-election swing. So something to bear in mind when you get those results, when the returning officer takes the stage there. If the Labour majority is bigger than 7k, Labour have pulled off a by-election record tonight. Is it probable? Not sure. Yeah, I don't know. I think the fact that... Ooh, what did we get? Yeah, I think the fact that we got a bang on a poll, a result in Kingswood that was in line with the polls, I would be minded to think that maybe the Labour win in Wellingborough isn't that substantial. It would be sizable. The fact of the matter is, if Labour picks up Wellingborough, they're really doing very well. But I wouldn't expect it to be a huge win. But if it is, if Labour do brilliantly, if Labour outperform the polls in Wellingborough, but only do as well with them in Kingswood, I think that warrants a discussion. That's something to give some thought to. Mike McMahon, Sky save result in 15 minutes. Perfect. Oh my god, I can't wait to go to bed. I don't know why. I'm just very tired. It's been a day. It's been an absolute day. You know what? I'm gonna have a square. I've got one of these, so I'm over the moon. Result imminent, Ben. Apparently. Oh, okay. Does it say that? I've got the BBC open in the background. Let's go to live. What we got?
And the Conservative MP, Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg, was at the count. Of course, the Conservatives losing that seat.
Let's stick to some music, maybe. Sky showing the stage. Maybe it is on its way. I'm sticking with the BBC, unfortunately, or fortunately, maybe. Let's see what we can do. Should I put it on the screen? Let's see if we can do that, shall we? Have I got a license? Yes. I don't want to be doing anything silly. I don't want to get pulled off whatever. So I won't do anything, you know. What do we got? Actually, should we listen to Mr. Rees-Mogg for a little while?
That the The economy going, we need the Bank of England to start cutting interest rates. It's delayed doing that as it delayed putting them up, and we've had terrible failures in...
Oh, that's interesting. So Rees-Mogg now is not necessarily talking about boats, he's talking about getting the economy growing, which, interesting.
Forgive me, I don't have the numbers in front of me right now, but from memory, I think I'd be right in saying, and I'm sure I'll be corrected widely if I'm not, but I think I'd be right in saying that if you added the Reform vote to the Conservative Party vote this evening...
It was about 70 above the Labour
it would have, you would
Yes.
have voted. So have Reform cost the Conservatives this by-election?
I wouldn't like to put it that way, because a party doesn't have a divine right to voters. We have to win them to vote.
Okay. You know, Rees-Mogg's right there, and something to bear in mind that whilst the BBC and other journalists will naturally think, okay, if you combine Com plus Ref, you know, that beats Labour. I mean, yes, that is mathematically correct, but as we know, as we've just been discussing for the past half hour, Reform voters don't go wholesale to the Conservatism. We shouldn't expect to see that.
Voters would just have shifted over, but...
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, Rees-Mogg was just saying that as I muted him.
Does all of this mean tonight, we know we're looking at a potential by-election defeat in Wellingborough as well. What does it mean for Rishi Sunak's leadership and your confidence in him moving forward towards a general election?
Oh, Rishi Sunak's leadership is solid and has support, and by-elections don't change that.
Don't they? Okay, right, yeah. Stephen says, let's just move back to the chat. Stephen says they cut everything to reduce the debt. The debt still went up. Where has the money saved from the cuts disappeared to? Answers on a postcard. Excellent question, Stephen. I've just had the council budget for Cheshire West and Chester, and people were saying exactly the same to Conservative councillors, and all they could say in return is, it's not your money, it's taxpayers' money. Why aren't you giving it to potholes and the green bin charge? Which felt like, honestly, Conservative and Labour councillors were having completely different conversations with each other. What else we got? Let's go back to Rees-Mogg. What do we got? How do I turn it up? There we go.
In a by-election, and you say, can I count on your support? Normal thing that politicians say. And people say, no, I'm not voting. And you then say, but come a general election, when it's a choice between Sir Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, then they say, well, we don't want Keir Starmer. So I think a general election focuses people's mind in a different way from a by-election.
That is Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Lovely. Right. Unfortunately, as I was hoping Mr. Rees-Mogg would cover all that. Oh, Wellingborough is due in a bit. Whenever it is. Sorry, I've done the thing of deciding to fill my mouth with a Rice Krispie square, which is not great. Oh, Sir John Curtis.
On the point that Jacob Rees-Mogg was making about reform, they have done the best so far in terms of a by-election this Parliament in Kingswood, haven't they?
Yes, that's correct. I mean, hitherto Reform's performances in by-elections have appeared to be rather anemic. Only once or twice did they manage to save their deposit. Now, in getting 10% of the vote, they, for the first time, put in the kind of performance that suggests that what the opinion polls have been saying, which is that support for reform has been going up, does indeed have a degree of truth to it. And that doesn't make life any easier for the Conservatives. The other message from the opinion polls recently has been that the Conservatives are losing as many votes now to Reform as they are to Labour. And if that were to happen in a general election with Reform standing in Conservative-held seats in a way that they did not do back in 2019, then you can see why many Conservative MP will be unhappy, concerned, worried about what we've seen in Kingswood and perhaps are also going to see in Wellingborough.
Yeah, something to absolutely consider is what this will mean for other parts of the country, really. So if we could get the forecast up, I would want to show you what the country would look like if an election was held now. Britain predicts, if I can get it up. Let's go up here. Right, who would win if an election was held today? These naturally on old boundaries. I think I've explained it plenty well enough. We're still waiting for the whole visual to be changed. But what you're seeing in certain parts of the country is, I wish I could show it. Oh, I can't show it. No. Oh, bother, I've chosen the wrong bit. Well, what I'm trying to say is, across the country, you're seeing some pretty sizable Labour leads, Labour gains. If we look at these numbers, 400 seats, 160, 400 seats for Labour, 160 for the Conservatives, and 0 for Reform, nevertheless getting 10% of the vote, and in plenty seats over here. Plenty seats. You see the Reform vote in places like Boston coming away close to 20%, in Clacton 20%, maybe even 25, 30% if Nigel Farage is prompted as the candidate. And in enough seats, let's be honest, if you do check it, particularly there, if you can see it in the corner of the screen there, Rochester and Stroud, formerly Mark Reckless, the UKIP MP's seat. If you add Reform and Con, what do you end up with? Con seat. But we know it doesn't work like that, does it? If you added as high as 30% of the Reform vote to the Con seat, what do you get? 1.3, 2.6, 3.9, 4 point. Yeah, that still would be a Labour gain. Close gain, but, tough ask that. And, yeah, I don't know if that's going to work, that. But what else have we got? Dan says, haven't discussed the Reform stand down at last election in Tory seats. Yeah, they're going to do it again. They say they're not. Richard Tice is promising bonfire on all seats. So, yeah. Yeah, something to think about there. Oh, Matt F says, Luke Trill on Twitter just said, Reform's current voting intention 59% Tory 2019. So, yeah, 60%, 6 in 10 of the Reform vote is Boris Johnson Tories, let's put it that way. But a lot of them, not in substantial number of them, are also people who didn't vote at the last election. Needs to be remembered that, okay? And as Luke's More in Common polling site found, only 26% of likely Reform voters say they would vote Tory if Reform didn't stand, which is on the higher end, I think, of, how Reform voters would go if there was no Reform candidate. So, yeah, I think it was either YouGov or indeed More in Common who found as many as 30% of Reform voters would go Tory, but I think it was YouGov that found a much lower transfer share. Don't remember the figure though. Don't remember the figure. Anyway, Mr. Sir John is still speaking. Let me see if I can change the screen here. Let's go there.
Feel pleased, but when Labour won this constituency from 1997 to 2005, on each occasion they won the seat by a bigger margin than the 10 points they achieved tonight. True, the constituency's changed to some degree, but actually in terms of its political makeup, the last redistribution of Kingswood didn't make that much difference. It doesn't explain the gap. So yes, Labour have done well, but they've not necessarily put on the kind of performance that will enable them to say, you know what, we're doing as well as Labour did under Sir Tony Blair in the late 90s and early 2000s.
So what do you think the Labour strategists will now be looking at?
Well, I think the first thing we have to wait and see what happens in Wellingborough. I mean, in a sense, the apparent rise of Reform is a two-edged sword for Labour. On the one hand, if it continues, it's going to make Labour, the Conservatives' job of trying to defend seats, including defending what at the moment you would regard as very safe Conservative seats, it's going to make it more difficult. And to that extent, at least, it's good news for Labour. On the other hand, Labour must be asking themselves, well, why is it that in the face of what seems to be still a deeply unpopular government, it's only picking up half the vote that the Conservatives are losing? What does that mean about the extent to which the voters are invested in us as a party that they want to see in government after the next general election? And there's other polling evidence out there, levels of satisfaction with Sir Keir Starmer, the perception of whether or not Labour is ready for government, where the numbers are certainly not as good as Tony Blair enjoyed before 1997. And I think, in a sense, the challenge perhaps Labour above all have to worry about at the moment, it's not so much can they win the election, Answer to that? Probably, although not definitely. But if indeed it is true that the electorate are not that enthusiastic about Labour, and given the very difficult task the next government will face, just bear in mind there is very little fiscal headroom, the economy is not doing very well, taxation is at a record high, the public services are not thought to be working, particularly the health service. Turning that round will be difficult. It may well mean breaking election promises, e.g., perhaps, having to raise taxes. And if Labour don't enter into government with the enthusiasm of the electorate, I think the question that is now raising itself is, will Labour find themselves in as much trouble as the current government after about 18 months, if indeed the inheritance they get is so difficult and they find it as difficult as the current government to turn things around?
Yeah, really, really interesting, Sir John. We're seeing pictures of the vote in Wellingborough being counted. Hopefully that will come very shortly. I also...
Oh, give me strength. It's still being counted. Oh, right. Yes. Okay. So yeah, I think Sir John. Well, it would be yeah. What can I add to that? I'm not going to try to. MJL 1999 says, I don't know if I'll ever see a bigger political shambles in my entire lifetime than this period of Conservative rule. And despite that, yes, there is weakness in Labour's lead. 19 points ahead on voting intention, but plus 10 on the economy, plus 11 on likeability over the Prime Minister, and plus 2 on your leader's own likeability. Here's the thing. I'm going to get this chart up again. I'm going to get this chart up again. I'm going to compare it to Tony Blair. I'm going to compare it to David Cameron. I'm going to compare it to, let's compare it to Miliband and Corbyn and anyone else who lost the election. And I want you to sort of see, you can really judge for yourself how healthy Labour's lead is really when you compare it to actual winners and actual losers. Because I look at this and I think, yes, Labour's good. Labour's on course for an election victory here. They've got a healthy lead on voting intention, good enough on the economy, good enough against the PM. It's just Starmer's own ratings aren't the best on earth, but they're good enough to eke out a lead, good enough to eke out a probable win, aren't they? And that should be enough, shouldn't it? Shouldn't it? But yeah. Are we due a recount in Wellingborough? Sophia says, well, Sophia asks that. Stephen says it must be close if it's a recount. Dan Morris says it was always predicted to be slow, but no signs of a recount. Matt F says surprised it's still being counted, as the BBC reported earlier. The count said they'd effectively wrapped things up and candidates were gravitating towards their teams and entourages. Yeah. Let's see what else people are saying. Let's go on the Twitters and Facebooks and everything in between. I'm seeing absolutely nothing. Let me have a look. Let me see who is at the count. Anyone we know at the count? Who's there? Yeah, it's incredibly long. Is it the latest we've had a by-election? No. When did Batley and Spen declare? No. Yeah, I think that was quite late too. The idea that it's due any minute, the idea that Wellingborough's due any minute is a bit of a hard thing to believe, isn't it? But let's see what we got.
To say something.
Sky News are just having a panel discussion about politics, unsurprisingly. Yeah, we're not sure yet. 3:30, Henry Riley says, reporter of LBC, says Wellingborough should come before 3:30. Is it going to actually come? Not a clue. What else we got? I realise I'm actually just very, very bloody tired. And I'm getting quite annoyed about that. Why am I getting annoyed at being tired? Where is Richard Tice right now. Is he in Wellingborough or Kingswood?
Of your policies there, but isn't it more the case that voters are turning to you as a protest vote rather than for anything that you're actually standing for?
Absolutely the opposite. They're coming to us as they hear about us. Look, 3 years ago we were on 1% and nobody had heard of us. So it takes time to build a brand. But no, what people are saying is actually you've got the courage to tell it as it is, to say how difficult it is, and come up with some radical, different, bold alternative proposals, frankly, to save Britain, because we're in recession at 0.3% in the last quarter. Per head, it's even worse than that throughout the whole of 2023. Per head GDP, we're in recession. This is serious stuff. People are feeling significantly poorer as a result of this Conservative government's policies.
The Conservatives say a vote for reform is a vote to put Sir Keir Starmer in number 10, and they're right, aren't they? We don't know the result tonight, but if the Conservatives do lose, that may well be because of Conservative voters turning to you instead. A vote for you is actually a vote for the Labour Party.
The Tories are terrified of us because we've got the policies that make sense, that bluntly will save Britain, and they realise that they've had their opportunity.
Sorry. Just want to make this point. That was the exact same questioning put to UKIP's candidates back in 2010 through to 15. A vote for you is a vote for Labour, isn't it? Yeah.
Heavens, there's someone who's arrived on the scene who's got some good policies that will essentially save Britain, and that's why people are starting to vote for us.
Okay, so what would be a good result for you here tonight? Put a figure on it.
If we're around or above our national polling average, then we'd be, that would be delighted. That'd be the first time. We've been criticised in the past by members of the media that we've never, in a by-election, equalled our pollings. That's all going to change, I think, this evening, and I think people will realise we've arrived. Absolutely, we're on the political map. As I say, we'll be polling in both these by-elections, third largest, and we're delighted.
Just final question. You said before you're going to stand in every seat and you're going to challenge the Conservatives. No packs this time. Are you willing to reiterate that promise?
Completely, without question, reiterate it. 630 seats across the whole of England, Scotland, Wales. No deals, no pacts. We want the British people to have the choice everywhere of our policies that'll save Britain.
That'll do that then. Okay, let's return to it. Yeah, what does that say? What did Tice say there? First of all, I feel like I was being atted there. Yeah, I've been one of those people saying reform has been underperforming the polls. Tonight, they are performing them. They're performing at them, which is interesting. Well, something to consider. I'm just going to mute BBC because they're present in the background for me. Something to consider this. UKIP overperformed the polls. There might be an argument that Labour overperformed the polls in the run-up to 97. Actually, I'm not sure if they did, given they were polling 50%. They overperformed in the early 80s. Yeah, they did overperform the polls. Okay, fine. Oppositions generally overperform the polls, and smaller parties do too in by-elections. What does that say when we have by-elections now in which the opposition and smaller parties are performing par for the course with the polls? Does that mean we should expect the polls are telling us a tale that is out of kilter with where the actual numbers lie? Well, that's hard to prove. Does it mean that we are in a sort of new era? Maybe I've written before that uniform swing, as in, everything rises by 5 points, 5 points, 5 points, as opposed to 20% of that share, 20% of that smaller share, and 20% of that smaller share proportionally. I've written that uniform swing may be less and less relevant, which means basically more dramatic results for the Conservatives, more dramatic results for the government. I think we might be in new territory. There is reason to think we're in new territory. There is reason to think that actually polls might not narrow as they normally do in the past. Hard to say, hard to argue for now. We don't really know yet. The Wellingborough result is expected soon, as the BBC says. They're looking at an empty stage, and yes, that's about it. Anyway, what do we got here? people are posting in. I do think it's new era, and also polling is sharper. Polling is absolutely sharper. We are much better at polling than we used to be, 100%. But we all remember the mistakes more than we do the successes, which is, that's how we are. We're a cynical people. We all remember the potholes on the road than we do the roads that are completely smooth, don't we? And that's how people generate their opinions. Reform 10% and Green 5% in Mayo shows dissatisfaction with both of the parties. Yeah. That's a pretty fair take. I think with the Greens' potential for more is pretty sizable. Pretty sizable there, Sean. But again, that is something that I think is artificially squashed by the fact, first of all, Labour's in opposition, Labour's not in government, and once the, what did I call it, ABT, the anyone but Tory factor, once that dies, well, that's trouble for who's that trouble for? Labour. So yeah. Matt F, in reference to the Batley and Spen by-election, says, I recall Batley being rather late. The sun was nearly coming up at the time, as we were closely examining a side view picture of all of the vote bundles and seeing whether that could prematurely tell us the result. I remember that. Oh my God, I remember that. I think I did it on this stream actually, pulling up a screenshot, a shot from the count of the Batley and Spen by-election. We're looking at some bundles and we're thinking, okay, did we know what part of Batley and Spen this was actually in the by-election? Was this in the Spenborough Valley, or was this in actually Batley proper? And we're thinking, oh gosh, Kim led better, not led better, as some Southerners say. She's just edging the Tory. Galloway is still a force. He's still there. It was, yeah. I treat, the way I commentate on this, sometimes I treat it too much like a horse race. I think, but it is a horse race, isn't it? Or at least that's what we like to say it is on our leaflets, especially when there's a third party trying to break in. When is this bloody thing coming up? What do you think the Conservatives could do? What do you think the Conservatives will do to stop the hemorrhaging? Hello, MJL 1999. Welcome to the stream. So, what could the Conservatives do to stop this? 20 points behind in the polls. They're being absolutely caned in by-elections. There is that's something interesting. Kingswood showed the support for the Greens and Lib Dems unsqueezed. Wasn't squeezed, that was it? That's interesting. Let me just go back to the result. And I just want to compare it. What did Britain Predict say in Kingswood? What did we say? Just excuse me as I look up this. Come on, how do I do this? Not helpful at all. How can I not zoom in? Right, okay. Anyway, Kingswood. We had Green 6, Lib Dem 5. Green 6, Lib Dem 5. Green 6 there, Lib Dem 4. To be honest, that's not really squeezed. Yeah, you're seeing support for the smaller progressive parties not being squeezed in this by-election. You're seeing the Labour vote pretty much matching the by-election. You're seeing the Tory vote overperforming the by-election by 3 points. That's something to consider. Yeah. Something I'm going to sleep on that. Because that's quite, yeah. So just to answer your question, MJL 1999, what do you think the Conservatives could or will do to stop the hemorrhage? Not a lot. Well, to stop the hemorrhage, they need to lose the election first. Because, I really think the fact of the matter is, because they are the incumbents in a period of politics in which voters want a change of government, the best way to stop the hemorrhage is to lose the election. Nevertheless, you want a better answer than that, I understand, and so here's something. Make an election completely about the issue you are most relatively competitive on, which is boats and borders. Try and drag public opinion to something else. Now, this could go 2 ways. 3 ways, actually. And I hope I can sort of keep to this argument. So, The Conservative way of stopping the hemorrhage, I think, in my view, is to go hard on boats and borders. But it could do a few things that could hit them hard long term, could hit them hard medium term, or could save their skin. Saving the skin rallies the base. Go hard on boats and borders, rallies the base back, squeezes that reform vote, gets 3 in 10 of reform voters back, motivates those core Boris backers to come out for the Conservatives, because the enthusiasm for Rishi Sunak now is naff. It's non-existent. Go hard on immigration, go hard on borders, go hard on our solution to fix the borders is what? Leave the ECHR, or whatever you can imagine. Rallies the base. Base rallying exercise. Might work. However, the problem with that is this. You could end up... So that's the first one, rally the base. Second one is the effect of the going hard on boats. You could turn people off long term. Or maybe there's only 2 or 3. You could turn people off. You need to recognise that Labour and Tory voters, when put together, imagine 10 Tory voters, representative of the Tory base, Tory coalition, were put in the same room, you would find a great many of them would disagree with each other. Same with Labour voters. I think Labour and Tory strategists quietly realise this, but no one really talks about it. But I think Labour and Tory activists do not realise this at all, and they need to. They need to get their heads around the fact that their base is diverse. Their base is diverse in ways perhaps they don't like, because they want a caricature of their vote, not what their vote actually is. Anyway. Sometimes I lose my train of thought. I do apologise. What am I going with this? Yeah. The base rallying exercise risks turning off everyone else that is not the base. So, people who were waverers, who held their nose for Brexit Boris, were naturally Conservative anyway. If you go hard on boats and borders, you could shut those people out from voting you for a long time. A generation almost. So whilst it will rally the base and push the Tory share up from, what is it now, 20, 25, 26, 27% to maybe 30%, 32%, it will create a new ceiling of support for them, however temporary or however long term that may be. So rally the base could push you up to 30%, but it will stop you from getting 32, 33%. You know what I mean there? That's the way to stop the hemorrhage, but it's a long term hit. What else could you do? I think that's it actually. Yeah, I think there's only 2 words. I was saying a third. It may come to me. So yeah, the base rallying exercise could stop the hemorrhage, but the risk is it could turn off other voters. Is there another thing? I'm not sure. Hope that answers your question anyway. I'm trying to. Robin Wilde, friend of the show, I think. Familiar name. Does the unsqueeziness reflect that those are seen as a foregone conclusion? What does the unsqueeziness reflect that these are seen as a foregone conclusion? I don't know what you mean, sorry, Robin. Stephen, the Tories could stop getting everything wrong for a start when they talk. You wonder who they are talking to because voters clearly don't feel like it's them. That's a complete fair point, and that actually speaks to the base strategy I'm kind of alluding to there, because if they go to the base, they could risk, they could risk turning off the waverers, creating a sort of limit, an artificial ceiling on support, but they could also inadvertently motivate their opponents' voters. If the Conservatives define themselves on being as hard as possible in immigration, they may end the reform problem, but in doing so, they may motivate more and more voters to think it is absolutely important that we keep the Conservatives out of office for however long possible. Which, the ABT factor that is presently bringing Labour to number 10 may last longer. The base strategy will rally those numbers higher, risks creating an artificial ceiling, and risks pushing out a hell of a lot more voters to deal the Tories the biggest blow possible and keep them out of number 10 for a longer period of time. That's the downside of the base rallying strategy, but I would put it to you, what other strategy do the Conservatives have other than rallying the base? We don't know. I don't know. Yeah, Apparently, got some news here. Okay, hello. Hello to everyone commenting. God, I'm surprised we've got 100 and a bit actually watching here. Hi, thanks for joining. Hope you're having a wonderful night. I'm looking forward to bed. Result has been delayed. The Wellingborough result has been delayed as apparently they have lost 10 votes. They're checking the bundles to find them. Fair enough, that does happen. Does it happen? Do you lose votes? Yeah, I think it's happened before. Bundle checks happen, sure. They're doing a bundle check to make sure the tally matches whatever. Okay. Christian Lack asked, wouldn't going hard on boats and borders highlight the issue more to a reformish position? Yeah, here's the problem as well. The only issue in which the Conservatives are competitive is immigration, boats and borders. I love saying I love alliteration. That's why I do boats and borders. Now, when I say competitive, I mean like competitive with Labour on. That I need to remind you, though, that though they're competitive with Labour on the economy, though they're competitive with Labour on immigration, they're still behind Labour on immigration. They're still seen as performing poorly on immigration. So yeah, maybe it will highlight more that the Conservatives are messing it up. And so if I was a strategist from the Conservatives, I would say, right, you cannot operate from the position of the status quo. Because if you operate as the incumbent on immigration, you're going to lose. Because as you have rightly said, Christian, it's highlighting an issue of which they are doing poorly on. So what are you going to do? Argue from the position of an insurgent, argue from the position of a radical who's going to change the system. And what better way to do that than to commit to, let's leave this artificial European construct called the ECHR. Maybe that's the solution for them. Marianne Horvath says, is there hope for the One Nation Tories to gain the control of the party and shift to the centre? Who asked this question? Is it Marianne or Rory Stewart? Is there hope? I think it's only after defeat. This is the problem. You've got, if you're a Conservative, Marianne, I would honestly say you've got your party in such a horrid position. You need to lose first to gain again. You've got to have the defeats. You've got to have the clear out. You've got to have a sort of situation in which your public relations are reset, so to speak. It's hard ask. I don't think there's any other way. I mean, maybe that's my prejudice speaking. Maybe that's my party prejudice speaking. I don't think there is. And I'm ready to be convinced otherwise. Small boats were all I could think of as well, and I agree that kind of shtick doesn't work in an increasingly diverse country. Yeah. Look, one thing to bear about this country, UK, generally, we are a pro-restrictions nation. We like to shout boo to Johnny Foreigner more than we like to shout I love you to Johnny Foreigner. We like the sound of the more anti-immigrant rhetoric. However, when you get down to the specifics, people like immigrants, generally speaking. And that's almost all kinds of immigrants, not just the doctors, not just the incredibly intelligent certain people from Commonwealth countries. It's quite broad, or increasingly broad. We have softened, but we are still more pro-restriction than pro-freedom. Never forget that. The median attitude is still it's closer to the Tory one than Labour, I think. In rhetoric terms, maybe not in policy terms. Robin, we met at Labour conference. Option 3 is it highlights the base issue to the third-party voters and Robin Wild. Yeah, we met at Labour conference. How you doing? And it's not even like the Conservatives have gone hard on immigration besides relatively token gestures for the Boris Brexit base. Yeah. What the Conservatives do is they've got to sound convincing on immigration, and maybe the only way to do that is to just go hard in the sense that abandon or recognise that you are not going to win as an incumbent. You've got to win as the ECHR leavers, which is I feel like it's a rehash of the old Brexit wars, because it obviously is. And I don't know if it'll necessarily work, but yeah. Jay Hacker says, to be fair, Rishi Sunak's only option. I'll put the comments here if I can. To be fair, Rishi Sunak's only option is to rally the base. Yeah. Oh, I see. Hello. Rishi Sunak's only option is to rally the base. There's no way he could act as a right radical. He's too much of a John Major type. You know what? I don't get the John Major comparison, because Major... Let me get this right. Major was quite well liked with the voters. Pretty well liked. the relationship, I always find I'm quite fascinated by the personal. The relationship between John Major and Neil Kinnock was allegedly pretty good. They got on quite well, made a lot of jokes together, and I think there's a famous photo of all the two of them and Paddy Ashdown having a good laugh, and it's sweet. But anyway, the idea of Rishi Sunak is comparable to John Major. I don't know if it makes sense, because one of Rishi Sunak's worst qualities amongst the public is being seen as out of touch. And I think Major was seen as more like a granddad who just, who'd lost touch with the country. But to the point, like Rishi Sunak, need to do some investigating about that. You might be right, Hacker, actually. The more I talk, the more I convince myself I might be wrong, actually. Sean, return of One Nation Tories will result in a generational death in Tory party with mass defections to reform two parties at the moment. Yeah, there was that risk. What is the future of the Tory party post Sunak, post defeat? I did some analysis looking at the Tory parliamentary party. What is to become of it when they're defeated? Now, we don't know what the Tory candidates who haven't been elected yet, but have been selected. So, in my local case, think Afra Brandreth in Chester South and Edisbury. She isn't an MP yet. She's a candidate, but we don't know in what position of the party she stands in. For instance, she's very much keeping her cards close to her chest. All we know is she's the daughter of Giles Brandreth, the comedian, who, on telly is great. As the MP for Chester, though, yeah, I don't think he necessarily enjoyed being the MP for Chester, according to, admittedly, every Labour activist I speak to who was involved in Chester at the time. But anyway, we don't know in which position those people will sit. All we know is the position of the Tory Parliamentary Party. And I was looking at the data, which is, if you only get safe Tories, if the Tory party is halved at the next election, which is for all intents and purposes likely, and if you only include Tory MPs who've indicated they're staying on, generally speaking, not much changes. You would think, right, there would be some sort of factional shift. Maybe all the Borisites are in the marginals or in the safe seats. Maybe all the hardcore Brexiteers are in a certain part of the country, certain part of the world. If you get rid of the half the Tory seats by marginality, so most marginal to least, and you cut it by half, the remaining half doesn't change much. The gap between those that backed Liz Truss versus Rishi Sunak barely changes. The proportion of those who wanted to make really quite nasty remarks about trans people in a certain education bill barely changes. It's pretty much, if you lose half the MPs, you lose half the quite anti-trans MPs. You lose half the pro-Trust MPs, you lose half the pro-Sunak MPs, there is no serious factional shift, if these factions, of course, still exist and they're not as fluid as, of course, we inevitably think they are. So there isn't much to sort of get excited by there, except the old May, .gif, nothing has changed. And I don't think much will change. So if you're seeing the fights now, if you think that the fights are there now, I'd expect they're probably going to continue. Maybe people will rally around a figure. I don't know. Will they? One thing I'm really keen on. I'm not a betting man, except I have a trading 1212, trading 121. Is it trading 121? Trading 212 account. Stupidly got in it because 3 of my friends bullied me to have a go, and I thought, you might as well. I've got a savings account anyway. I thought I'd have a go. And I don't normally do betting, except that. But if I was a betting man and I had to choose the future of the Tory party, I would not be putting money on Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, or anything else. Are we due the provisional results soon? Anyway, just to finish this off, I would put money on, what's his bloody name? I forgot his name. Are we getting the result now? Oh, well, it's not on the BBC. Let me get Sky up.
en la mañana del 26 hubo un choque entre guerreros unidos.
Have achieved that recently. They achieved it in Tamworth in
Ah,
October.
so we're getting just for clarification for all in the chat, or rather all in the stream, not watching the chat or whatever. Provisional result is coming. Thank you very much for the people giving that. So Sophia and Dan, candidates being told. So for those who've never been to a count, and yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Candidates get asked to come together. Here's the result. Do you object to it? I.e., do you want to recount if it's that close? Are you happy with this? Then they go to the declaration. Boom. Fine. Sky are saying this is a strong result for Labour. Sky are saying it's a Labour gain. No surprise there. Anyway, yes, you've got it right, Stephen Walkley. That's him. James Cleverly. If I had to be a betting man, I'd put money on the next Conservative leader after Sunak. James Cleverly's the guy. And I remember him from the EU referendum. I thought, of all the Tory politicians to come out and take a quite strong position, because some Tory MPs didn't. Some Tory MPs decided to hedge their bets. Tracy Crouch, for instance, I don't even think we know which position she took on it, and she's now standing down as an MP. But James Cleverly, when he came out as a Leaver, I thought, okay, when he started to perform as a Leaver, I thought, wow, he's bloody good. He's not your Peter Bones. He's not your Bill Cash. And to be honest, there's a different kind. Is it because he's black? No, I doubt it. It's his performance. It's his quite, his rugged military man type, whatever. And yeah, I thought he was bloody good as a Leaver in 2016. And it's since then that I thought, yeah, good performer, could be good. However, will the Tory party wear a unifier like that? Are they ready for a unifier? Are they ready to vote for someone like that over a comfort eater like Priti Patel, like Suella, like, I don't know. I can't imagine the idea that I can't imagine the Tory party going for Suella Braverman. But it's not impossible. These are the days we are in now. We are in reverse Corbyn. We're in reverse. It's now, you know the meme, like, look at me, I'm the captain now. That's the Tory party membership, or they're going to be at the end of the day. Oh, are we going to be getting results soon? Right, stand by your beds again. Yeah. So Dan's expecting them to go full on right. Hitchhikers Pie says Kemi Badenoch is getting a lot of heat. Yeah, I completely forgot Kemi there. Yeah, Laszlo says, as much as I hated him, bring back Rory Stewart. Yeah, I've got Rory's book. I need to read that. I'm unfortunately, and this is the most wet centrist thing to do, is to actually really enjoy the rest of his politics. But I actually do. Don't always agree with anything to say, which goes without saying. But I just find, people who've either been at the centre or around the centre of politics, it's worth it listening to them. Although I do confess, I absolutely do not like the Osborne Balls podcast at all. I think it's the way. Maybe it's because I'm a councillor now and I see the literal effects of local government cuts, front and centre. I'm a youth worker. Well, no, I volunteer for a youth club, the only youth club in Chester, because all the others got closed. Because all the others got closed because of budget cuts. And so when you have a podcast about Balls and Osborne getting together to laugh and joke about, austerity, I kind of think like, yeah, okay. Anyway, to return to some form of neutrality. MJL thought Humza Yousaf's appearance was pretty bad. I thought he was quite. I prefer it when people can be personable. And I thought he wasn't bad. I thought he wasn't terrible. Matt F says, I fought Cleverly for a while, but I think he's largely been replaced as the moderate wing star figure by Mordaunt. Well, if Mordaunt holds a seat. And has been tainted through his time in the cabinet, especially through the last tumultuous weeks of Johnson. Yeah, that's the thing with Cleverly. He stood pretty. He stood comfortable, right? He was always there by the leader. And yeah, he has tainted himself as a consequence. Wasn't he the one that also said it's a shithole about Stockton on Tees? Yeah. Anyway, the membership would have brought back Boris in October 22. Yeah, they probably would have. Remember, it is the membership that votes. Average age 67. Yeah, it is overwhelmingly male. I think. What's his name? Is it Tim? No, he's a nice guy on Twitter. Tim Bale, Professor Tim Bale of Queen Mary Politics. He does a lot of research on the Conservative Party membership.
I'm
Anyway,
looking for Ben Habib, the Reform candidate. Can't see him, actually. He must be there.
Ready, comrades.
You can see there's handshakes there for some of the candidates. The returning officer is the High Sheriff of Northamptonshire, no less. A gentleman called Milan Shah. You'll see him in his splendid costume in a minute. The acting returning officer is Adele Wiley. She's the chief executive of the Northamptonshire Council. So when I say imminent, I really mean it this time.
Finally.
Because the candidates are all there. We're just waiting for the returning officer. We believe that Labour have won. We believe that Reform UK have perhaps, as Richard Tice told us, polled double figures.
That Lib Dem candidate looks more like a Green candidate.
People are moving
And that Green candidate
towards the front of the hall. So a lot of photographers now completely wrecking our shot. This is not good. So I'm assuming that the candidates are going to up on the platform, actually, so we can see them.
No, I don't think.
Well, we can certainly see that hat, John, just poking above everybody else. I wonder if the Labour candidate could borrow the hat if they're the ones to be making a victory speech. But certainly Labour have been very buoyant there this morning.
Yes. Yes, they have indeed. They've not been publicly claiming victory, but we do believe that Labour have won. What I'm hoping is that the candidates go up on the platform so we can see them. All we can see at the moment is the big yellow hat of the monster raving loony candidate.
Right. Well, the declaration is imminent, but everyone's just rushing towards it like it's Euston train station. Oh, I can't wait to go to bed. Oh, bollocks, I've got to write tomorrow's morning call. Right, okay. I've got 200 words to write for tomorrow. That's easy. Should be.
Wellingborough is a seat that was Labour in the Blair years. Peter Bone won it from Labour in 2005. He only won by a few hundred votes in that election, gradually built up his majority over a number of general elections until 2019. We had a majority of 18,500, a seemingly impregnable majority, but it does look as though it has been wiped.
Yes, so it's looking like a quite comfortable Labour gain. By how much, we don't know. A few thousand votes. Just remember this. If the Labour majority is bigger than 7,000 votes, that would represent the largest Tory to Labour swing in by-election, if not parliamentary, history. Bear that in mind. If the Labour majority is larger than either 6,900 or 7,000 votes, biggest swing to Labour from the Conservatives in a parliamentary election history. All right. I don't think it's guaranteed, but I think we're not far from it. Something to keep an eye on there. What are they waiting for? Oh yeah, imagine that.
Yeah, 18,500. And it will probably, I think they need something like an 18% swing. Now, more people are going forward now. I I'm just hoping that the candidates go up onto the platform. At the moment, I think I'm right in saying they're standing on the floor. More people are being allowed through to the front. Our camera, fortunately, is on a raised platform, not that high. As you can probably see, supporters of all the candidates are moving their way forward. Yes, it would be a big swing for Labour. If Labour have won this, it's a great result for them, obviously. One of their best by-election results in recent years. If you'd said a few months ago that Labour were going to take Wellingborough from the Conservatives, people would have said, well, surely not. But of course, the circumstances of Peter Bone's demise, the absolutely damning report on him by a parliamentary inquiry into his conduct, bullying allegations, sexual misconduct, that triggered a recall petition. Now, for a recall petition, for an MP to be dumped, it needs 10% of the voters in the constituency to call for that. And it was 13.2%.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Eyes on the prize.
I believe is Adele White.
Invited to join the stage there. Oh, we have one struggling. It's the High Sheriff. High Sheriff of Northamptonshire here. Full garb. Here we go. Oh, he's taking his time, isn't he?
Waiting, testing the microphone.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and welcome. I, Milan Shah, being the returning officer at the election of a Member of Parliament for Wellingborough on Thursday, the 15th of February 2024, do hereby give notice that the number of votes recorded for each candidate at the said election is as follows. Delves, Nicholas Charles Ellsworth, also known as Nick the Flying Brick, the official Monster Raving Loony Party, 217 votes. Gunn, Anna Savage, Liberal Democrats, 1,422 votes. Habib Binyamin Naim, also known as Ben Habib, Reform UK, 3,919 votes. Harrison Helen Jane, the Conservative Party candidate, 7,408 votes. J. Malla, post-mortem, Ankit Love, JKNPP, 18 votes. Kitchen, Genevieve Victoria, also known as Jen Kitchen, Labour Party, 13,844 votes. Marola, Alessandro, also known as Alex Marola, Britain First, Stop the Boats, 477 votes.
417 for Britain First.
Morris, William John, also known as Will Morris, Green Party, 1,020 votes. Pine Bailey, Andre Pierre, Bamikole, also known as Andre Pine Bailey, Independent, 172 votes. Turner Hawes, Marion Eileen, 1,115 votes. Watts, Kevin Charles, also known as Kev Watts, Independent, 533 votes. The number of...
Right then, okay, so here's how to look at this. I'm just going to put this in a tweet in 1 hot minute. Labour, 46%, up 20 points on the last election. Conservatives, down a staggering 38 points there at 25% of the vote. Reform, once more performing according to the polls. 13% here, very impressive from them. Well, they're living up to the polls. That's impressive in and of itself. And the Greens the Lib Dems, missed their deposit with 4.7%. An independent comes away with 4% there. Wellingborough parliamentary by-election result. Labour game from Conservative. Lovely, lovely, lovely. That is it. Wow.
So that's a majority of nearly 6,500 for Labour.
And I invite the winning candidate to the left.
We'll listen to a few words from the candidate.
Kitchen, who has won with a majority 6,436, the majority, over the Conservatives. Here she is.
I'm sorry, that's my mum. So I am delighted to be stood here as the newly elected Labour MP for Wellingborough. I am honoured that local people have placed their trust in me and the Labour Party under Keir Starmer. But I also know from the thousands of conversations I have had during this campaign how desperately people want change and a fresh start for our country. The people of Wellingborough have spoken for Britain. This is a stunning victory for the Labour Party and must send a message from Northamptonshire to Downing Street. I ran a positive campaign built on both the local issues that people told me needed addressing here, as well as the national desire for change. People here are patriotic and hopeful for our country, and they care about our community. But they know that our roads aren't fit to drive on, getting your child a doctor's appointment can seem impossible, and that they are paying more and getting less. Today, they said, enough is enough.
Okay, I won't give the whole floor to the candidate. That is sizable. Let's just get the result up there. Kingswood. I'm going to compare Kingswood with Wellingborough because the Labour Party got a greater share of the vote in Tory Shire Wellingborough than they did in Battleground Kingswood. Think about that. The Conservatives' collapse is 38 points. That's the kind of collapse you get in seats where the Lib Dems run rampant, where the orange diamonds are on every street corner. But it's here in Wellingborough, and the Labour Party won it. Christ alive, something's happened there. And let's just compare it to Kingswood again. Reform 10% in Kingswood, Reform 13% in Wellingborough. Not the biggest difference if you're expecting anything sizable there, but the gap between the Conservatives and the Reform in Wellingborough is greater. Sorry, the gap is smaller than the gap between the Conservatives and Labour. That's something. That is something, absolutely indeed. If we compare it to what my forecast said, I'm delighted to say that Britain predicts is bang on once again for the Reform vote. Bang on once again for the second time. The Conservatives 37, Labour 38. If we go back here, I don't think that was anywhere close. Although I would notice, it's just more and more voters, greater share for Labour, smaller share for the Conservatives. This, as the Sky presenter was just saying then, which you can't hear but I can, a huge blow, because this is not just Battleground Britain, this is Safe as Houses Britain, or meant to be. This is a result that outperforms the polling, outperforms numbers that would put you on course for 400 seats. These are quite seriously poor numbers. And I just want to emphasise, Labour did better. The margin of victory for the Labour Party than supposed next party of government, was greater in Northamptonshire, countryside Wellingborough, than it was in battleground Kingswood. Kingswood is a seat Labour needs to gain a majority. Kingswood is the outskirts of Bristol. The vote share for the Greens, wasn't enough to necessarily eat into this narrative, okay? The collapse for the Conservatives was greater in Wellingborough than it was in Kingswood, which is slightly reflected in what we're seeing in the Britain Predicts model, but not by much. Nevertheless, what we see here is a general reflection of the polling. If you see right now, if you believe the polls, that the Labour Party are on 400 seats and the Conservatives are on around about 160, 150, you can be pretty much vindicated here. Okay? This is yeah, absolutely. And Fairly Sad Panda has just rightly put me in a place there. This is the seat, Wellingborough, where the Tories had the galaxy brain move of putting up the spouse of the guy that was ousted by recall. Fair enough. Would that significantly affect the result, though? Yeah, actually, could by a significant amount, that Remember, Britain Predicts had the Tories losing 25, 26 points here. They lose 38 points. That's bloody big. That's sizable stuff. Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure how we can necessarily look at that. That's just poor. Ogham the Bold pretty much sums it up. If one was a headline writer, safe as no houses. There is seemingly very few safe seats for the Conservatives. Percentage turnout. What is the turnout in Wellingborough? I don't think I have it. Oh yes, it was 30 something percent. It wasn't terrible, if I remember rightly. Yeah, it was pretty good. Pretty good stuff. Going through some more questions, sorry. The Tories retained 23% of their 2019 vote. Well, we can't say with necessary certainty what proportion of the 2019 vote they necessarily held, because there's churn. But I know what you mean. Sorry, they retained only a quarter of what they got in 2019. Must be one of the largest ever collapses of a vote. It is sizable. It's up there, but if you're looking to pour cold water on the Labour result here, this is 200/300 votes short of the largest Contalab swing in history. The largest Contalab swing in history was Dudley West in 1996, 5, 7, I don't know what year. Okay? Because it is how it is. Yeah. If you are looking for a simple answer as to what these two by-elections mean, it means the following. The polls are closer to 20-point lead for Labour than they are an 11-point lead. If you see polling which shows Labour ahead by only 10, 11 points, by-election results do not bear that out at all. Okay, and there has been one or two polls that sent half of poll Twitter, or, well, London Twitter, into a bit of a tailspin. So, yeah. The general polling average, the poll tracker, the Britain Elects poll tracker, and I'll just pull it up here, tracking Labour's lead. We have Labour on 19 points ahead. We have Labour's lead on the economy 10 points ahead. Not as strong as the voting intention. I take that. Keir Starmer's lead over the PM, 11 points, and Starmer's own lead on likability, only 2 points. Again, a weak spot, a serious weak spot. But it doesn't seem to necessarily translate to a weaker Labour share, because what we've seen in these two by-elections tonight is, one, in Kingswood, a near enough reflection of these polls, the 19-point Labour lead nationally, and in Wellingborough, an overperformance that you may, yes, say is muddied by the fact the Conservative candidate is the spouse, well, girlfriend of the disgraced Tory MP. Sure, fine, but I don't think it can account for such a huge fall in Tory support. If you want to do an average, what Kingswood and Wellingborough shows you is a Labour lead of close to, 25 points, I guess, or around there, maybe a little bit less than that. All right? It's sizable stuff. And I know I would say this, of course I would say this, but I have to say it this. If you want a clear-cut picture of where public opinion lies, Go to Britain Elects. Don't look at the outlier polls. Don't look at the ones that get the biggest retweets. Go to Britain Elects. Go to us, where our trackers are seemingly enough getting a clearer picture of where public opinion lies than the outliers that you are more likely to see. Is it quite as exciting? Dramatic? No. Is it going to generate as much copy as others? No. But it tells you the truth, or it seems to give a clearer picture, at least so far. At least so far, because we're not sure yet. Things could change. The fact of the matter is that until recently, Reform were a phantom voter in the numbers. Reform were by and large, not performing anywhere, close at all in local elections, in by-elections, and then boom, what happens here? Something's changed. Something's changed in that arithmetic. We need to look at that. I'm going to be doing that later today, tomorrow. I think the opinion tables might have the answer, because it's they who who do split it in the drill down by high attention to politics, low attention to politics, and mid attention to politics. And I think that could tell us whether something has changed or not, and I'm gonna have a look at that later. But yeah, these by-elections, the Wellingborough and Kingswood by-elections, 2 gains for the Labour Party, sizable drops in support for the Conservatives. That one in Wellingborough is huge. A lot of that maybe can be attributed to Peter Bone and Miss Bone, or whatever her surname is. I can't remember. I don't know. All I know is this: is that a Labour gain in Kingswood that reflects the polls, and a Labour gain in Wellingborough that outperforms the polls by a cataclysmic event. So if an election was held tomorrow, 400 and something seats, probably closer to 450 seats once you account for tactical voting, which would also push up the Liberal Democrat numbers by a sizable amount as well. So there we go. I'm going to bed now. Actually, well, no, I've got 200 to 300 words to write for tomorrow's morning call, which is a newsletter published by the New Statesman, Mondays to Fridays. You get a little bit of politics from the good NS journos, and then at the bottom you have a chart from me, a chart of the day, with a few hundred words that I decide to ramble about, either at 2 a.m. at night or at 9 a.m. in the morning. Who knows? Anyway. If you want to subscribe to that, give it a search. Morning Call on the New Statesman. It's a newsletter via... is it Substack? Yeah, I think it is. Anyway, look, this was great. I am utterly exhausted. It has been another day from hell, but I'm looking forward to going to sleep now. It's been good. It's been good. Thank you very much for the traffic. I've noticed we've done quite well there. Naturally, I'll be back one day whenever there's another by-election. Might do Rochdale. I think we could make Rochdale more of a discussion, really. Yeah, but there's a lot. I don't know if Rochdale will be necessarily significant in terms of telling us where the country lies. It won't at all be telling us where the country lies. I think it could have a lot to say about where Muslim voters lie. But yeah, I need to have a think about that. I need to absolutely do. But yeah, it needs to be talked to. And I think, honestly, if Gorgeous George is actually going to make his debut back into the House of Commons, that's definitely worth covering, even if Azhar Ali does it as well. But anyway, yeah, right, that concludes it. I'm off. Thank you very much indeed. You've been great. Thank you to the regular commenters. All of you have been great. It's been absolutely lovely to talk to you. So long, farewell, and yeah, that's it. Goodbye.